Welcome back to the HPP podcast. I'm Rich Harris, and thank you for joining us again. In our last episode, we previewed the Central and Pacific divisions of the NBA and talked with Kentucky's five-star sophomore forward, Damian Collins. You can listen to that episode or any other HPP episode at hoopsprospects.com. Please check that out. Today, I'm once again joined by Drew Barton, Maverick Swinson, and we will wrap up our division previews with the Northwest and the Southwest. And hopefully we may be joined by a guest. We're not completely sure. We were supposed to have Teddy Allen, who you may know from playing at New Mexico State in this year's tournament. He had a great tournament. But we had to move Teddy to a different day. So anyway, gentlemen, how are you doing? I assume you both enjoyed the Japanese Grand Prix?
Yeah, I didn't even know that was happening, Rich. I don't even know. I'm unaware of what the Japanese Grand Prix even is, but I'm doing well. No complaints over here. I'm doing well. You know, hoop season is a couple days away at this point, so I'm excited.
Yes, it is. Well, I will fill you in. Max Verstappen not only won the race, he did so without dropping any F-bombs to my knowledge, and he won the world championship for the season as the greatest race car driver on the planet for the second year in a row. Congratulations, Max. Please come on the show. We're not too big enough for you. You can come on. Don't be afraid. All right. How about you, Maverick? How was your weekend?
It was all good. Enjoyed some NBA preseason. Got to enjoy a good 11 a.m. Bucks-Hawks game, even though it was the only game of that day. So I'm feeling good. Feeling good about the topics we're going to be talking about today. Yeah, we got some interesting stuff to talk about today. And we'll start with the latest on Draymond Green. Drew, this is your team. I'm going to let you start off. Is this a big deal or is it not?
I'm going to say that it's definitely a deal. I'm not going to go as far as say big. I mean, I think this is something where, this is where the advent of like social media and this like kind of culture of everything's got to be leaked and we want to really comes into play. I mean, I know it's different players, but like Michael Jordan punched Steve Kerr. They got into a fight at practice. I've had a conversation with an ex-NBA executive actually a couple of days ago, and he said that at all the teams he had been with, there'd always been some kind of fight. I mean, varying degrees, some verbal, some physical, nothing too crazy. It's kind of part of the game. I mean, you're taking highly competitive individuals, and Draymond being one of the most competitive and fiery individuals in the league. And, whether they want to admit it or not, there is a pressure coming into this season to validate last year's performance. If the Warriors get bounced in the first round of the playoffs, there's going to be questions about the validity of last year. So, I mean, they're facing the pressure of we need to make the Western Conference Finals minimum and need to be competitive there. So, I mean, it definitely is concerning because, from the looks of it, it doesn't look like it kind of escalated extremely quickly from them kind of standing a bit apart to next thing you know, coming to blows. But I will say Draymond seemed pretty sincere in his apology. I bought it as like he actually realized I was out of line, which is kind of a step in the right direction for him. In the past, he's been fiery and he's doubled down on his hot takes and comments. So I think by the time the season starts, they'll be fine. I mean, Jordan Poole in preseason last night had 24 points, I think 5 rebounds, 6 assists. So he clearly didn't seem bothered by it. But I'm going to take it as an issue, but one that will be resolved by the time the season rolls around. And maybe Draymond misses the first week of the season or something, and I'm sure they're going to find him.
Right. So the last thing I heard was it wasn't a given that he would be there for the season opener. Right now, they're calling it like a mini sabbatical or something like that. They're not really calling it officially a suspension. Maverick, you have any thoughts here?
Well, being an NBA player is very competitive. You're in a very competitive field. I think the team is going to be okay. I think that the Warriors are going to still be a very solid team come the start of the season. The only issue that I see is how public it went. And obviously the leaked video to TMZ with Draymond throwing the punch is what started it, just becoming in the public eye. That's really the only issue because you're going to have a bunch of people talking about it constantly, especially the beginning of the season. social media is going to keep talking about it for a couple of months. But I don't think it's going to bother the players. I think that the team is still going to trust Draymond. It's not like Draymond is a player that just came onto the team this offseason. He's a champion. He is one of their emotional leaders and one of the greatest defenders of all time. So the team is going to be fine. But the only issue that I could see coming is just how public everything went.
Yeah. I guess to me, I think the thing that we don't know is, I suppose, if there is some friction between Poole and Draymond, which is obviously easy to imagine, that could become problematic. If there isn't, then I don't really see this as being that big of a deal. And I was really surprised. It seemed to me that the media really took relished, piling on Draymond for this. And I'm thinking, if you ever played sports, stuff like this happens all the time. I mean, with even the best of friends, people
forget that Magic Johnson and Isaiah Thomas in the finals. Those guys were thick as thieves, best friends going into it. And Isaiah went to the hoop and the Magic laid him out. I mean, I know they're on different teams, but if you're not competitive in sports, you're like, show me someone who's not competitive in the NBA and I'll show you a loser.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, this playoffs, I was thinking, Jordan Poole is going to become one of the more disliked players in the league because he talks too much. He chats too much. And I don't want to make out like I'm some tough guy or something, but different sport. We were on opposing teams, but there was this guy who used to have a reputation for, just running his mouth, trash talking all the time. And I thought he took it a step too far. I know he took it a step too far. And I gave him a chance to back out of it. And instead of that, he doubled down. So I proceeded to, he doubled down and I clocked him, and put him down. So, some people, when you run your mouth, if you run your mouth, you better be prepared to get popped. That's the way I grew up. I don't know about anybody else. I mean, it's not like he was stabbed or shot or anything else. I mean, I think a healthy, little scrap like that is just, what makes boys be boys, and it's just part of competition.
Well, I think something that we have to think about too is if they were really worried about escalating to the point of like Draymond legitimately trying to, kick his ass and like hurt him. I mean, everyone else, obviously they ran over to break it up, but like it wasn't, if you look at the court, everyone seemed kind of like, I don't know. It just didn't seem like the general sense of urgency across the entire court was there of like, this is going too far. Draymond's on the warpath. Draymond popped him. I mean, he got him good. No doubt. Yeah. And he should never have look, I agree that is probably going too far, like having to straight up pop him in the face, but it wasn't like the entire gym, everyone was freaking out. Like it seemed that like as a team, they're like, okay, too far, line crossed, but hey, are we good? We're good. Draymond apologized. So it'll be interesting. Like I said, the worst case scenario is going to be if Draymond comes back and there's either outward tension or Draymond comes back and like plays poorly. Then the media is just going to keep piling on. So I think the Warriors need to come out firing and kind of rally behind this and come out and start the season hot just to put to bed all the, the rumors of, there's dissension. Draymond's an issue. Like if they come out and in the first 10 games, they're, 7-3 and, Draymond's back and he's doing his thing and Jordan's doing his thing. I think this will be done.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that bothered me about the media is they kept on calling it a sucker punch. I guess I don't know where the media grows up. Do they all grow up in the little gated communities and they all play, like with, I don't know, Barbie dolls or whatever? What the hell? I mean, I know a sucker punch. I remember one time in a locker room, two guys had got into it in the gym and one guy waited around the corner. And as the guy came walking to the showers, the guy hit him sideways, shattered his jaw. Okay, that's a sucker punch. Draymond was right in front of him. Jordan Poole he could have put up his arms. He could have got up and retaliated. It wasn't a sucker punch. There was a confrontation go on. Did Draymond start it? Yes. Am I condoning people going around hitting people? No, but I'm just saying sometimes this stuff happens, especially with people like Jordan Poole who like to run their mouth. I've gotten clocked a couple times because I like to run my mouth. So anyway, that's my take on it, which is unlike most people's take. So the other really big story this week was Victor Wembanyama. Continues to get all kinds of hype, and he went against Scoot Henderson when Ignite played Met 92 from the French Jeep Elite League, which, by the way, that's the top division in France and one of the better leagues in the country outside of the NBA. Victor's team included Aaron Henry from Michigan State, Hugo Bassan that we saw in the camp, and the Bucks drafted him, right? Yeah, the Bucks. Yeah, the Bucks drafted him. So he's with them. Also, little guy out of LSU, Waters. What's his name? Tremont Waters? Is it Tremont?
Yeah, Tremont. I think it's Tremont.
Yeah, Tremont Waters from LSU was on that team. So
Bassan was drafted by the Pacers.
What's that?
Bassan was drafted by the Pacers.
Yeah, but didn't he ultimately end up on the Bucks? No, or maybe I'm wrong.
It doesn't say.
Okay.
He probably signed something, but yep. He was traded to the Bucks. Right before Summer League.
Right. Okay. So given that, we've seen again, the media has just, to me, it's just going crazy here. And some of these comments apparently are coming from NBA people, but I heard, some people say that he should shut it down. Another person said, whatever organization drafts him, the value of that organization will go up $500 million. So did you guys get to catch one game was played last Tuesday? The other one was played last Thursday. I only saw Tuesday's game so far.
I saw the first one when Scoot, the one where Scoot played, because I know Henderson came out pretty early in the second game, if I recall.
Yes.
And I'm not gonna lie, when you look at Victor, you see it is one of those, like, dear God, like, you start thinking of all the crazy things that you're gonna be able to scheme up and do with this kid on a basketball court. He clearly put up the numbers. When you look at a guy with nowhere near the similar height, but, like, I guess build and skill set like Chet never looked like this. Like Wembanyama literally dominated, and he dominated from all three levels, defended the rim, it was knocking down, I think at one point, five blocks, 7 threes or something like that in the game that I watched.
That's exactly what he had.
Yeah. And so you see it all, and he's going to be the first pick. It doesn't matter. In my opinion, there is nothing no one in the NCAA at this point can do to catch him. After watching those games, if he does shut it down, it almost would be like, I'm not proposing that he does. I'm not a fan of that. I think you got to play. You got to continue to condition, continue to work on your game. But, that's going to stick in NBA personnel's minds for the rest of the year until the draft. So I'm pretty much guaranteeing he's going to go number one. Honestly, I was more impressed with Scoot just from the standpoint of I hadn't seen him play. And, like, his body looks NBA ready. Some of the moves that he was making, he had one really great Euro step to the basket over Victor with a great reverse layup. He looked, for a guard, I think he's 6'2", 6'3".
Yep.
So, height-wise, maybe on the little bit on the shorter side, but just he looks, his body build, the way he plays,
not too undersized for a point guard. A little bit, but not.
Yeah, nothing crazy. Yeah. The way I looked at him, I was like, he kind of gave me like a more buff built Ja Morant. Ja is an absolute leaper. I don't think Scoot's. Ja Morant might be the best jumper in the league. I don't think Scoot's that, but I was just watching him play, and I'm like, he plays with a confidence. The moment wasn't too big for him. I think when I saw him, he had 28 points, 9 assists, 5-6 rebounds, did everything, and had no problem scoring I mean, he had a great step back jumper over Wembanyama.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I really like.
He almost faked him out of his sneakers on that one.
You know, Victor's going to go number one because of the physical profile. But Scoot to me is, from a pure basketball skill standpoint, I think that kid has got all the right stuff.
Right. Maverick, you know, they're the thing that I think that bothered me, and we'll talk about comparisons. We'll continue this discussion, but the thing that really, you know, when I think generational talent, to me, by definition, that means like once a generation, a player comes and sets himself above. Now, I think we actually, let me first ask you this, guys. The guys I picked, you know, the latest, what I would consider the generational talents. And these are guys to me who either like won like multiple championships or changed the game. You could probably argue maybe one or two of these guys shouldn't be on the list, but here's the list I came up with. I'm talking about going back to the 90s. I put MJ, Hakeem, Shaquille, Tim Duncan, Kobe, LeBron, and Steph. Would you call those guys generational talents?
Yeah, absolutely. Every single you cannot tell the story of basketball without those guys, and every single one of them has claim to a spot on the basketball Mount Rushmore to some capacity. So right.
So now my question to you, Maverick, is: would you put Victor Wembanyama? Yeah, I got to work on that name.
Wembanyama.
Would you put him? I mean, this is what people are saying. That the people are saying, you know, people are going to tank like never before. And, you know, we've never seen a guy like this. Do you put him in that group of Mount Rushmore people I just mentioned? Do you see him being in that group?
I've never been one to follow what the media has said because usually they are wrong. They just kind of like to go for clicks. They like to do a bunch of other things. But I'm sorry, everyone. I have to put him in the generational talent column. I have to. Offensively, we talked a little bit about comparisons. I know Drew mentioned Chet Holmgren. Another comparison I hear all the time is Kristaps Porzingis. I'm telling you right now that, Victor, there is no comparison you could possibly make. And here is the one thing to me that separates him from everything else, and it's his shooting mechanics. I don't think I have ever seen a player 6'10" and above with the absolute silky smooth shooting mechanics off the dribble and off the catch as Victor. I have never seen it before. He can do it in the mid-range and the three-point. And he can take it off of 5 dribbles, 1 dribble, 10 dribbles. I mean, in the game, he was able to take it down the court and do something with the ball and still shoot a mid-range jumper. I don't think I've ever seen something like that before. And I know that one of
I would argue that KP did similar things in Europe.
At this capacity?
Yeah.
Because when KP played,
well, maybe not so smooth off the dribble, but maybe he's got him there. But yeah, I mean, to me, when I sit there and watch him, I'm not like, oh my God, you know, it's like, I've never seen anything like this before. I have seen stuff like this before. I've seen Anthony Davis. I've seen, KP. I've seen Evan Mobley,
well, I mean, I think the thing, it's the height. I mean, that's what's making everyone, it's the height and the length, because like Rich said, I mean, we've seen Kevin Durant at 6'10", 6'11". I mean, there's no better, just silky smooth, you know, like you said, Matt. I just think the length and the height are what's enticing, because if you get a Kevin Durant-like offensive package, even if it's not, you know, to that degree, if it's in that ballpark, and you add the ability to block 2 or 3 shots a game, that's where people are like, oh man, like, and his frame, yes, he's super thin, but I will say his frame looks like it will carry weight and definition better than like a Chet Holmgren.
It already has. It
already does. Yeah,
he looked like Holmgren a year or two ago,
yeah.
And now he's already filled out where he doesn't even, you know, Holmgren and him look like night and day now. And he's certainly got more fluidity than Holmgren. There's no doubt in my mind.
He's a great athlete at 7'5". Like Holmgren is 7'2" or 7'1", whatever. Wembanyama is a great athlete in that body. Like, he's agile, mobile, gets to the rim, defends the rim. But I don't know. Generational is tough because you look at that list of guys and you're like, if he has half the impact of those guys, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Right.
And so it's like to say, now when I look at the list you have here, Rich, of guys, kind of those first round guys, you got Anthony Davis, Joel, Karl-Anthony Towns, Wiseman, Mobley. I will say on that list, the only guys on that list that I think are in terms of hype is probably Anthony Davis and maybe Zion. In terms of, I think, like, hype that were like, when we saw them play, we're like, God damn, they are dominant.
Well, the reason why I put these guys on the list is I was just like to think, can we remember back? Because that's what seems like we have such short memories. But can we remember back what we thought of Anthony Davis at the time, or Joel Embiid, or Ben Simmons, or Luka, or Zion, or LaMelo, or Anthony Edwards, or even Chet Holmgren, and last year? Can you remember? I mean, think of everything everybody was saying about Chet, and now they're saying everything about Victor. Now on this list, the way I look at it is, first of all, let's take Luka, for example. Okay. Luka played a tougher schedule than Victor did last year, and his numbers were far, far superior. Victor only got 17 minutes a game last year in France. He wasn't a dominant rebounder. He isn't a dominant rebounder. He shot something like 27% from three last year. He shot about 41% from the field at his height. How do you do that? All right. So, and what I saw, first of all, okay. Ignite is a conglomeration of a handful of veterans and mostly very, very young high school, college level age players. Okay. We also know the G League is infamous for not playing any defense. The reigning G League MVP of the year was cut yesterday by the Sixers. Okay. And when he was shooting shots yesterday, I watched it yesterday, but when he was shooting shots on Tuesday, how many people actually have a hand in his face? Now, you could argue you could never get a hand in his face because he's so tall, but I mean, he was often wide open, and yes, he can shoot off the dribble, and yes, that's impressive for his body type, but can he make moves like Scoot Henderson? Can he make moves like Damian Lillard or Kyrie Irving? Come on now. No, and he never will. I don't care what happens. At his height, you're never going to be able to make those kinds of moves off the dribble. I didn't really see a lot of dribble drive ability. Defensively, I saw a lot of mistakes. I saw him struggle in the pick and roll. I saw him struggle on the perimeter. Okay, so what I'm looking at right now is I'm thinking a Rudy Gobert with a nice, really, really nice jump shot. But I still think you're going to have, it's not the be all end all. What makes LeBron, what made Kobe, what made, Michael so great was that they could basically guard anybody. They could take anybody. They could score anywhere on the court. This guy can't. This guy's not going to be able to put it on the floor and drive by, Royce O'Neal.
I'd be very interesting to see how he'd match up against a guy like Giannis. Like Giannis to me would be a really interesting matchup because that's another kind of freakish body type athlete. I mean, he's not 7'3", 7'4", but like that would be a matchup where you're like, I would be very interested to see. I mean, I personally think after watching the game that the better basketball player is Scoot Henderson. Like,
I don't know if I'd go that far. But my argument, what I'm trying to make is, yes, this guy, to me, I think he's the number one player right now. Okay. But let's not get carried away here. Right. I still think he's that special. And I don't think anybody his height is ever going to be that special, especially with today's rules. You know what I'm saying? I mean, the big man is just, he has his limitations.
No, and that's what, when I say the best, I'm not talking about prospect and like who will have better overall impact in the league. I'm just saying, like, from the skill standpoint of shooting, dribbling, passing, defending, like, Scoot Henderson to me is more of a like he just seems more of like a ready-made basketball player, because he couldn't rely on the fact that I'm bigger than you, I'm just going to shoot up. Like, he had to learn how to handle the ball, get to the rim, finish at the rim. He had to learn how to play make for others, because he didn't have the luxury of being, oh, I'm 7-3, I'm just going to one dribble pull up over everybody. So that, like, Wembanyama, impact-wise, you can't, a 6'2" Scoot can't have the same impact Wembanyama does, because if all Victor does in his NBA career is stand at the rim like this with his hands up, he's going to have an impact on the game because he's so long. But, like, Scoot showed me, like, I can get to my spot. I can get others involved. I can defend along the perimeter. I can handle the ball. I can be an NBA point guard. I have an NBA body. So, Victor's the number one pick. Between the two, if I had to pick one, you kind of got to take the gamble on Victor. But Scoot Henderson really impressed me. Granted, I hadn't seen him play before I'd seen Victor, so maybe it was also just like, oh, wow, this is what the hype is about.
Maverick, I'm going to get to your point, but I'm going to tell you one day we're going to get out of this habit of just because a guy's 7 feet tall and can do some guard-like things. I'm telling you, they can't do guard-like things when they get against NBA players. They might be able to do it in college. They might be able to do it in the G League. Maybe they can even do it in Europe once in a while, but they can't do that crap in the very few people. I mean, look at even Embiid. When he tries to put the ball on the floor, he still looks, like he's going to lose it, 50% of the time. All right, Maverick, I know you've been waiting to throw your 2 cents in here. Go for it.
Okay, so I have a couple of things. I do agree. I think that Victor did struggle defensively. I think he's pretty slow-footed, and I saw that he struggled a lot to stay in front of most players, which kind of worries me a little bit. But I want to get back to the generational talent that we have listed. Basically, I mean, almost all of these guys that we have listed right here did not come in as generational talents. I mean, we have Steph. There was a ton of questions about Steph coming out. I mean, could he create his own shot at the next level? We knew he was going to be a good shooter, but could he defend at the next level? Could he stay on the floor? I mean, Kobe came in as a late lottery pick, had a rough rookie year. He wasn't looked at as to be the next. I mean, the next Michael Jordan. That was never him. MJ came in without any sort of jump shot at all. He was a dominant college player, and he was an elite slasher. But shot creation wise,
he also won the national championship with a baseline jumper. So,
I mean, his overall jump shot was not there, Rich. It wasn't there at all. His shot creation wasn't going to be like it took time to develop. And once you get more time with Victor, a nutritionist on his side, an NBA training personnel, he has the physical attributes, and one of the biggest things for me is the confidence. He has the confidence to be a generational player. All of these guys that we have listed, we're all just extremely confident in their game. Victor has that next level of confidence. I would say the exact same thing with Giannis and Luka as well. They have the confidence to be that type of player. So, I mean, it's tough right now because we can say that. I mean, Victor. I don't even think Victor is just a set five. I think that Victor could play multiple positions on the floor, and he could play with multiple positions. If he can play with another big man, maybe even two. He has that type of capability and that potential to get to that level of a shot creator.
Right. What about his effort? What about his running the floor? I mean, he was pretty nonchalant about that. And
I think the NBA is going to culture shock this kid.
What's that?
I personally think the NBA is going to culture shock this kid a little bit because he's coming, first and foremost, he is coming from this kind of pampered mindset of like, he's probably been told for the last 3 years, whenever you're eligible, you'll be the number one guy. And like, you can say what you want about international play, but like the level of athleticism and just individual skill just elevates so greatly at the NBA that I think it's going to culture shock him. I think he's going to come in and when he has to guard a Giannis or a Jokic and he's like, oh, you're as good as me and you're as big as me and you do things better than me.
What about the fact that he shot less than 30% from the floor, less than 42% from the floor, less than 28% from three? it
when you have the
wasn't
ultimate green light, you can kind of do whatever.
the
That's not going
only
to happen
number
in the
that
NBA.
stood out for him last year was block shots. He averaged like almost 2 in about 18 minutes of play, so that's like 1 every 9 minutes. That's outstanding. Yeah, so to me, ultimately, is I'm looking at a guy who's maybe upside, has the potential to be another Anthony Davis, another Kevin Durant, and probably better. I'm going to say he's going to be better than Davis. I'm going to say has the potential to be as productive as Durant, but Durant might be better in some areas and he might be better in other areas. I'm just worried about his rebounding. I'm worried about his effort. I don't see an outstanding defender right now. And I don't think he's going to be able to do all those dribble moves that he's doing, against G League Ignite, in the NBA.
Yeah. I think that's the thing is going to be, it's like the package is there. We just got to open it up and see. I mean, the reality is none of these questions are going to be answered until we see him in NBA action, because, he's going to put up the numbers back home in France just because he's better and bigger than everybody. So I think until we see him play in the NBA, we're just not going to know. But I think what's going to happen is
what if he doesn't? What if he doesn't? What if he has similar?
That's what I was going to say. I think what's going to happen is now that it is his draft year, he is going to be on the board. People are going to have to really now stop talking, and they're going to have to stop talking to talk about Victor Wembanyama and be willing to walk the walk and draft him. I think what we're going to start seeing is, we just saw him over here in the States. He put up huge numbers. He played in a very almost like an all-star game-like setting. He had the Scoot versus him, narrative. What I think we're going to see is 3, 4, or 5 months from now, the deficiencies are going to start being talked about. We're going to have people talking about, well, he's not very efficient from the floor. Is he trying his absolute hardest? Well, he doesn't rebound, and he's the biggest guy on the court. Because think about it with Chet. The same thing happened with Chet. Hype, starts college season. He had that game against Texas where he didn't do anything because Drew Timme had 40. And then all of a sudden the question, oh, well, okay, he can shoot and he can handle, but he doesn't really rebound that great. Well, he can defend the rim, but his conditioning, he's not the most conditioned guy. His body is framed. So that's what's going to happen with Victor. I think until basketball starts, it's going to be pretty low key. The moment he starts playing, people will have to start talking about the deficiencies, because he's not the perfect basketball player. Unless he averages 30, 15, and 15 on 80% from the field, people are going to have – there's going to be problems to point out.
And part of my argument is, I don't think there's ever going to be a perfect basketball player who's above 7 feet. I think they're always going to be LeBron, Michael size. That seems to be, once you start getting over 6'8", 6'9", you just start to run into problems with handling the ball, driving the ball. There's another thing. Guy doesn't pass that great. I mean, sometimes he makes some good looks, but he also makes some horrible, and he's not one to share the ball, So Mav, you got any final thoughts? And then we'll end this up with one question I want to ask both of you. But Mav, you have any thoughts before I throw this last question out?
Final thoughts. Let's not forget, everyone, that Victor will not be drafted tomorrow. He still has 1 more year to develop until he's drafted, and then he plays in the summer league. Then he debuts in the NBA. So, he's going to develop something. He's already came this far. NBA fans everywhere should be excited, and whoever gets the number 1 pick next year, y'all should be cheering to the sky.
Yep. All right, let me ask you this, both of you. Serious question. They're both the same age. All right. Luka just finished his championship run with Real Madrid, won EuroLeague, won the ACB, and Victor does whatever he's going to do this year. Who do you take number 1, Luka or Victor?
That's so hard, because
and I'm asking you to base this on what you know of Victor as of, Tuesday, what you saw on Tuesday.
For me, it's a position thing. I could base my entire offense around Luka. When I know I could see it whenever he played at Real Madrid. And I am a little bit biased but I don't think it would be a question for me. It would be Luka Doncic.
Yeah, I'd probably go Luka because, like Matt said, you can literally run an entire system around him. And if you look at it in like just the history of basketball, like it's always been. If you go back to the '80s, it's always been the big and the guard. I mean, it's changed a little bit now, obviously with the 3-point shot. Now it's just who has the most shooters, but it's always been the big and the guard. And if you look, the big always needed the guard. Kareem didn't win without Oscar. Then he had Magic. Shaq didn't win until Kobe came along. You know, Shaq didn't win without D-Wade. And it's changed now. But I think just on that precedent alone, when you have a guard like Luka who does everything, it's like I can surround him with whoever and whatever, and we can get to the Western Conference Finals. Like if you look at the team last year, he got to the Western Conference Finals and won a game, and that Mavs team had no one of real significance. Like Jalen Brunson was second best player, and that's fine.
Right.
But Jalen Brunson is not a top 20 NBA player. He's not. I don't think he's not a top 30 NBA player. If you really dig deep, probably.
Right.
You know. So I'd probably go Luka. Part of that is also, like Mav said, there is a bit of a bias. Like I've now seen Luka in the NBA, and that's kind of hard to like disconnect from.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah, I think I might go Luka.
I will tell you this. I mean, Spain is a notch above France.
Oh, yeah.
As far as the domestic league, and they both played in EuroLeague, and Luka's numbers, his last year, and Victor's numbers from last year in both leagues, both the French league and EuroLeague, they're not close. Luka's numbers would have crushed Victor's. So I think Victor has a lot to prove, because otherwise you're looking at numbers that just lead you to say, hey, what's going on here? So I don't know. I think people. How do you call him a generational talent? How do you say he's going to raise the value of an organization by $500 million based on one G League game when he just got done playing a whole season in France? Now, admittedly, he's gotten better. Okay, admittedly, he was 17. Now he's 18, turning 19. But still, we have a lot of us have short memories in the media. All right, so we really talked a lot about that, but I think it was worth talking about. And it's the first time we were actually really dove into the 2023 draft. So, all right, so moving back to the NBA, we got some injuries to talk about, and I'm gonna list all these injuries. I'm just gonna ask you guys, what are your biggest concerns here? Are there any you're like, oh boy, this is really bad news, or So Jalen Suggs, this week, he suffered a kneecap injury and a bone bruise, and he's going to be out till at least November. Corey Kispert sprained his ankle, and he's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks. So that was about a week ago. So now it's more like 3 to 5 weeks. Other players who are not going to be ready for the start of the regular season: Celtics, Robert Williams, and I'm going to give you the time that they're got a chance to come back. Robert Williams is out till December. TJ Warren, November. Lonzo Ball, December. Of course, that's a guess with him. Ricky Rubio, December. Jaren Jackson Jr., November. Danny Green, February. Chris Middleton, November. Joe Ingles, January. Jackson Hayes, November. Markelle Fultz, November. Gary Harris and his teammates Gary Harris and Jonathan Isaac are also November ? We haven't had an update on those guys. So any of these injuries, collectively and or individually, big concerns for you?
I would say Middleton and Ingles, or no. Yeah, Ingles on the Bucks now, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say Middleton and Ingles combined a little bit, because that eats into that depth at that kind of wing position for the Bucks. Obviously, Chris Middleton's an all-star caliber player, so you want to have him. But, that kind of concerns me, because you're going to be without two guys that are pretty much solid to high-end players at the wing. That does kind of hurt. But other than that, I mean, Robert Williams, kind of wish that he was healthy to go, but I mean, you have Al Horford, so I'm sure unless Horford goes off a cliff, the Celtics will be fine there. And the rest of them, I think, are generally role players. I'm not really too concerned about any of these other injuries. I mean, Jonathan Isaac hasn't played basketball in like 3 years, it feels like. So,
Yeah. I'd say one of the more noteworthy things is 4 of them are on the same team. Suggs, Fultz, Harris, and Isaac all on the same team.
It might be a blessing in disguise because they have so much damn talent. It might finally give the guys a chance to separate themselves.
Well, yeah, but we really wanted to see Suggs.
I want to see Suggs take the next step.
Yeah. How about you, Maverick? Any thoughts here on these injuries?
The Jaren Jackson Jr. injury is I don't think that's going to be talked about enough. I think that Memphis will miss him dearly. He helps so much with with playing a more versatile lineup. He can play the 5 and stretch out the 4 for Ja to attack in space. And he also can defend the perimeter and the post on switches. It really hurts him on that end. And I think Robert Williams, too. I think Robert Williams is a really good defender individually. And he really helped Boston defend at an elite level last year. I believe they were ranked number 1. And Robert Williams really contributed to that. So those two are really sticking with me. I believe Jaren. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Rich. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is out 4 to 6 months.
Yeah, but his injuries, his surgery took place in June.
Okay, so he'll probably come back.
So if you take average 5, that would put him in November. Yeah. So it could be longer than November. Just taking the average there. I know he is starting to ramp up his activity, but he hasn't played any 5-on-5 or anything like that. So he's definitely not going to be ready for the start of the season, but they do think there's a chance he could be ready in November.
No training camp. I mean, he's not going to be in game shape. It's going to take a while for him to get back there. Yeah, it's going to be kind of rough. Memphis might take a step back because of that injury, but we'll get more into that later on in the division previews.
Right. So we're going to dip into an early email bag question. And the reason we're doing this is, first of all, we have a bunch of questions this week. But second of all, this is something I forgot to mention last week. So I want to get this up near the top of the show. Daniel asked, how do I get in your fantasy league? I want to beat your asses. LOL. When's the draft and what's the format? So right now we don't have a full league, so we still have some open seats. So if you are interested in playing against Drew, myself, Maverick, and other HP people, you can write to admin, ADMIN, at hoopsprospects.com, the same address you use to send these questions. And we're going to do the draft a few days after the regular season starts, most likely the weekend after the season starts, which I believe will put us around the 21st, 22nd, somewhere in there. And we're going to most likely go with a roto format, category format, and most likely going to be a 10-person league. And what else do we need to throw in there, Drew?
That's probably it. I mean, if you think you can take us on, man, bring it. We welcome the challenge because we get a lot of people that always question our takes, sometimes rightfully so. So I'd love to see. I'm a competitive guy, man. Just so you know, fantasy sports is a big part of my life. I'm still reeling from horrible fantasy football loss this week, so
that's what I wondered. When I was texting you yesterday, not that I could hear your voice, but I just got this sense you're a little cranky, and I turned to my wife and I said, I think Drew's fantasy teams aren't doing so well today.
No, definitely not. Just for a quick rundown. Started Naheem Hines, concussion first drive of the game. Started T. Higgins, one of my favorite players in the league. Plays one series because he's an ankle injury, 0 fantasy points. Started my kicker, Young Hoku, who's been absolute money. Shanks a 52-yarder, gives me 1 point on the day.
Nice.
So on top of the fact that I lost my uncle, who's a massive trash talker. So we're fine. My team, outside of that, my team played well, but I got some revenge tour starting next week.
All right. So Daniel, thanks for that question, and hopefully you join us in the league. Again, admin at hoopsprospects.com if you want to get involved and play. We're going to get that set up. Hopefully, if we get enough people, we need at least 8. So we're not there yet. Okay, so now we're going to move on, finishing up our division previews, and basically we're looking at the offseason changes. Is the team better or worse? Where will they finish in division? Will they make the playoffs? And talking about any noticeable fantasy things. Are there any steals, any busts here to look at? So we're going to start off with the Portland Trail Blazers. Their changes, they lost Eric Bledsoe, Joe Ingles, Ben McLemore, CJ Ellerby, and they gained Jeremiah Grant from the Bulls and Gary Payton from Golden State in free agency. And their rookies they're adding are Shaden Sharp and Jabari Walker. So, Drew, what are your thoughts on Portland?
Yeah, so I know we've been hard on Portland, going back to the Shaden Sharp draft decision, and I think rightfully so. Now, when you look at this team through the lens of their starting five, this team got better solely by the fact that they should get a full season out of Dame. They did add Jeremy Grant, who I think is a really underrated kind of just plug and play guy at that 4. Nurkic should be healthy. So you look at the starting five and you have to think, okay, they're going to be better just by the fact that they'll get a healthy Dame Lillard this season, or so we expect. But I look at the rest of this roster, don't like it at all. Drew Eubanks, Trenton Woodford don't inspire much confidence at center. Justice Winslow has become a journeyman. I do love Jabari Walker at the power forward. He's an HP guy. I think before long, he's going to be the backup power forward and will be soaking up pretty good minutes there because he plays with great energy. He's a good rebounder. He can stretch the floor a little bit. And I think they're going to want to utilize him. I think Rich and I talked about it. Josh Hart's another great guy to have because he just kind of does all the small things, doesn't demand the ball, rebounds extremely well at the kind of wing position. I mean, he had some big double-digit rebound games back with the Pelicans. But again, Greg Bound, Nasir Little, I'm not really fearful of that. The shooting guard to me is something that I am very low on. I think Simon is going to have to prove a lot to me because when he extended is because Damian Lillard was out and CJ was gone and Nurkic was hurt. So when you're a ball-dominant guard, a scorer-first guard on a team where their best scoring options are all out, you're going to get to do whatever you want. He just signed that 4-year, $100 million deal. Maybe he comes out, learns how to play alongside Dame, and turns into the next CJ. And, hey, Portland would be thrilled with that. But I have a lot of questions. Fantasy-wise, I mean, he's a chucker. He's going to put shots up. He'll get points on the board. He'd be a great guy to have kind of in a utility spot on your bench because he's going to score. And they're going to need offense from the starting five. He's going to have to generate a lot of the offense. But, again, Shaden Sharp, we know how we feel about him. Keon Johnson, he's an okay option. And obviously you get to Dame and Gary Payton. I mean, Dame's Dame, by all accounts, hopefully he's healthy and that his kind of struggles were due to injury, not, maybe decline. I love Gary Payton as a guy, great role player, but the Warriors made him and kind of did what good teams do in any sport is they pump up the value of a guy who really doesn't have that much. And then the moment he's due for a payday, they let him walk, and then he goes and disappoints another team. And I think Gary Payton will disappoint. I think people are going to expect him to continue to ascend from last year. And the reality of it is he's not a playmaker. He's not a consistent shooter. He's a defensive hustle guy who is great in transition. And when you have Klay Thompson, Jordan Poole, Steph Curry, so many weapons around you that force the court to be spread, and Draymond's facilitating, and you literally are just running suicides basically and guarding the other team's best player, he's great. If you're going to ask him to if Dame goes down, you're asking Gary Payton to be your starting point guard, you're in trouble. So, like the starting five, don't love the whole roster.
Yeah, and they don't even have anybody behind Payton that's viable. Yeah. Mav?
Yeah, I think a healthy Lillard is the most important thing that this team needs. And I do like their additions. I like Jeremy Grant. I think he fits well. I think they desperately needed another athletic defender. And I think that Gary Payton II, I think he will be a good addition. I don't think he's going to be asked to handle the ball or run the point. I think Simons and Lillard are going to do that, which I'm going to get to now. I don't like the pairing. I think the whole reason why they traded CJ was to get more defense around Lillard. I think that was why they lost the Golden State series. They were just too stretched thin. They were an offensive powerhouse. They couldn't defend anything. You basically have the same combination with Simons and Lillard, but with just less chemistry between the two. So I don't get it. I mean, Simons got the ball every time. He was their primary scorer. last year after, everyone went down. And then there's the other guys. Grant was a primary scorer for Detroit the past 2 years. When is he going to get the ball? Because Simons and Lillard are going to take a lot of shots. When is he going to get the ball? Is he going to get the ball in the right places? Nurkic showed a lot of offense too in Eurobasket. Is he going to get the ball? Is he going to get the ball in the right places as well? Because Nurkic is going to probably play in that block mid post area. He showed some ability to create a little bit on the perimeter with Bosnia. Is he going to get the ball out there? Because that's what he worked on. Josh Hart. He's another guy that is not a sharpshooter. He needs the ball a little bit to create some. He's not really someone to rely on, but not a shooter either. He does little things, but on the offensive end, is he going to fit with this team? It's just a weird mix, in my opinion. Even though I think they got better, it's a weird mix. And to kind of top it off, it's not like that Portland has an experienced coach to really rely on to put them in the right positions. Billups, his first year as a head coach was honestly a wasted year. So this is his first year of coaching, in my opinion. He's going to have to put everyone in the right positions, get the ball to Lillard, Simons, and diversify enough to where it's not predictable. And the chemistry issue. None of these guys have played with each other in an improved West. So, yeah, they got better individually. I think that the depth is a problem as well. But I think Drew touched on that enough. I don't see them making the playoffs, but I do think that they could make the play-in. And I think that's what they should be hoping for. And then in free agency, make maybe another move to really help fit. And with Billups another year as a head coach, I think they'll be better the next year.
Yeah. They just have no depth. There's just so many unproven players that would have to step up. Guys like Nasir Little, Shaedon Sharp, Keon Johnson, Greg Brown, Jabari Walker. Peyton is an okay backup, but you certainly don't want to be in your six-man type. Drew Eubanks isn't a bad backup center, but again, you don't want him being the best guy off your bench. Justice Winslow, it just seems like the game, it's just passed him by somehow. There was a time where he was thought to be, have quite the bright future, but it never really worked out. So the fantasy wise, the one guy I would keep an eye on, because somebody's going to have to step up and produce. The starting five of this team's pretty solid, at least from an offensive standpoint. But somebody's going to have to step up, and the guy I'm looking at is Keon Johnson. He's having a nice preseason. He's ultra athletic. He can play defense. He can play multiple positions defensively. So the question is, can he start knocking down shots? And he's been looking pretty good in preseason. So I think he's a fantasy sleeper. So, by the way, I think they definitely will be fighting for a play-in spot, with teams like Sacramento, but I don't see them making the final eight for sure. So the next team, Oklahoma City, we'll talk about, and they lost Isaiah Roby to the Spurs. They didn't really add anybody beside draft picks or rookies, and they would be the two Jalen Williams, Usman Jang, and Chet Holmgren, of course, who's out for the season already. So they also made the trade with Houston last week, and they got basically Marquise Chris, Trey Burke out of that. Maybe those guys would contribute, maybe, I don't know. Doesn't seem to fit the OKC mold, but but there is, still, we talked about it last week a little bit in the show, that this team will be lacking a solid man to protect the rim. And they'll be, using guys like Jeremiah Robinson-Earl and Mike Muscala at center, maybe the rookie Jalen Williams, maybe Chris, maybe even Poku. So it looks like OKC is going to be in the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes. So, Mav, what are your thoughts? I mean, are they going to be the worst team in the league, OKC?
They're definitely going to be one of the worst.
Okay.
But I will say this. I really liked their draft last year. I think they got some really solid guys. And finally, they are going to commit Josh Giddey to the point guard position. I mean, I think he's going to be very successful at the point guard. But they're not good. And God help Oklahoma City if Poku is defending the rim, because it's going to be a free lane every time. And it's going to be a pretty rough season. I think Holmgren is going to be a great center for them, but they're going to be one of the bottom. They're going to be one of the bottom two teams in the division.
This is a team that, it's the old saying, they're a year away from being a year away. Losing Chet obviously lowers this team's ceiling. They're clearly going to be in the running for another top 5 pick at worst. And I'm sure their goal has to be they want Chet and Wembanyama to share the floor, because with Giddey, with Shea, with the Shea and extension, there's really no room for Scoot. So they clearly want to try to pair Chet and Wembanyama. I think their goal is going to be able to get him naturally. And if not, they're going to empty that war chest of assets, and they're going to make an offer that a team can't refuse. If they come and go, we'll give you 5-6 first rounders, 5-6 second rounders, and maybe throw in, a usable role player or even a rookie, like we'll throw in a Jalen Williams, the guard Jalen Williams, not center Jalen Williams, they'll do it. That's their plan this year. It has to be. There's so many individual pieces I really like on this team. I think Shea is long now, for the last 3 or 4 years, he's long been kind of all-star-ish. Like, the numbers look good. His team just doesn't win, and he's been banged up. So he's been kind of like trying to break in and break through that ceiling. I think, Mav was completely on point saying Giddey needs to run the point because he's not a shooter, but he has great vision. He's a rebounder. He can score in some way, so he's not a complete offensive liability. But once you start getting to the forward positions down to center, this team is awful. That's the reality. Without Chet Holmgren, this team is pretty much awful. Dort is usable. I know he had a big preseason game, but again, do I count on Lou Dort being my third best player week in and week out, game in and game out, and in the West? Absolutely not. And you just go down the list and you're like, nothing inspires confidence, at least in my opinion. So they'll win some games on the fact that they'll be gritty. They're young, so they're going to be competitive. This is the type of team that midway through the season, when everyone's kind of in the doldrums of like, okay, we're just, waiting for the playoffs to start, they'll pick up some wins because they'll just want it more than some of these teams, and they'll play spoiler. But you can't trust this team to make any noise whatsoever, in my opinion, especially with Chet out.
There's 3 guys on this team that I would take on my team right now, and I think they're all going to make strides. Josh Giddey, Shea, and Dort. And now Dort is never going to be an offensive firepower, but he's just a tremendous defender. Has been since his college days. Giddey was one of the best performers in summer league and is shooting the lights out in preseason. I think Giddey is going to make big strides this year. The one guy, you speak about, we speak about unicorns, and we talk about, another guy who had a lot of hype coming in, like Chet, like Victor, was Poku. And, but so far he's been, not look good. He's got a very Chet-like body. I haven't seen OKC play in the preseason yet. So does anybody know if he's bulked up at all?
I haven't seen him play. I know that I just kind of was looking through some of the box scores and I saw that Dort had a really good game. But I haven't actually seen him play, so I don't know what he's looking like physically.
So, Poku's always had the offensive potential, that 7 foot, who can make, shoot off the dribble and make some plays with the ball. But he gets pushed around a lot, and he just has no, they're very Chet-like in the fact that there's just not much to him. And he's never been, unlike Chet, Poku has never been a great shot blocker. Even when in his days playing in the minor leagues in Greece, he was a good shot blocker, but he wasn't an outstanding shot blocker. So and there's always been some question about his drive and his coachability. So it's kind of a make or break year, I think, for him, even though he's still pretty young. I think he's still only like 20.
I think he's 2021 in that range.
He was the youngest kid in his draft class. So
he's in that 2021 range for sure.
Yeah. So another guy I like, I think is going to make some good strides this year is Trey Mann. I think Trey is going to have a nice guard rotation, 3-guard rotation with Shea, Giddey, and Trey. They all can play the 2. They all can play the 3. They all can play, all 3 of them are combo guards is what I'm trying to say. So, and another guy I interviewed a couple years back at the G League Elite Camp, Aaron Wiggins. I think Aaron is, I don't expect huge things from him, but I could see him becoming a key reserve for them. And, maybe bringing some offense to Dort's defense. Though Aaron is not a bad defender himself. So he's always a player that I kind of liked, thought he was underrated coming out of the draft. So keep an eye on Aaron Wiggins as this team's already got a bunch of guys nursing injuries just like last year. So keep an eye on that. And of course, then there's Jalen Williams, who was on the show just before the combine and turned out to be the 12th overall pick. I think Jalen's going to go through some growing pains, especially on a young team that doesn't have a lot of players to actually, lead him on, give him good guidance. But eventually Jalen is going to be a very solid wing player, maybe even be able to play a little bit at the point, play on the ball. But all right. Next up on our list is the Minnesota Timberwolves. A lot of changes here. Patrick Beverley's gone, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, Josh Okogie, Jake Lehman, Leandro Balmaro, all gone. Coming in is Rudy Gobert, Kyle Anderson, Austin Rivers, Bryn Forbes. Josh Minot was added as a rookie free. No, he was a rookie that they added. And also Wendell Moore was another one of their rookies. So, what do you think, Drew? We got the combination now of Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert in the front court.
I don't really know what to make of this team because you look at the starting 5 and you're like, I've never been a big D'Angelo Russell guy. I mean, he gets his numbers. He'll get his, 16, 17 points a game, his 6, 7 assists. But I've just never been sold as like an actual point guard. He's not a defender. I'm kind of just like, he's serviceable. He's fine. Edwards is continuing to ascend. I mean, I think before long, Edwards is the type of guy who can contend for a scoring title. I mean, you want to talk about confidence. This kid he might be the most like confident player in the league just in terms of his body language. It almost comes across as like nonchalant, but I think he's really just like, I'm Anthony Edwards, get the ball, get out of my way. So I think he's only going to continue to get better. Jaden McDaniels is serviceable. I think last year he started about, if I'm not mistaken, about 30 games for them. So he has some experience in that starting role. He was about 9 points a game, 4 rebounds. So, when you have a team with Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns, he's the type of guy that you can kind of just plug in the middle there at the small forward, defend the wing, hit some timely shots, put a few points on the board. And then you get to the bigs. And this is where this team gets interesting because you have 2 bigs that are literally probably the most diametrically opposed bigs in basketball. You have one who is all offense, 3-point shooting contest, is liable to go for 40 any point, but you worry about his motor. He's not a defender. And Karl Anthony Towns is now becoming notorious for just disappearing acts. Like, gives you 35 and 12 one night, and the next night gives you 8 and 3. And you're like, what the hell happened in a 24-hour span? And then Gobert, no offensive game really whatsoever, but, is an elite rim protector, has elite length and size, even in the NBA. And I think Gobert last year, he is a player who's had some of the biggest, I think, dialogue discourse changes in such a short span. I mean, at one point people were talking about he's the best defender in the league, and this guy is the anchor of a team that can win it all. I've never been that, in my opinion. defensive player of the year is not just who has the biggest wingspan and stands in the paint. I think that should go to guys who can legitimately guard 1 through 5, a la Draymond, or guys who can shut down an opposing team's best wing, like a Kawhi Leonard. So I've always thought Rudy Gobert is a bit overrated. But now I think after that playoff performance with the Mavs, now he's a bit underrated, where people think he's garbage. He has no offensive game. Utah did not surround him with any sort of perimeter help. So asking your 7-footer to leave the paint and close out on a Maxi Kleba in the corner is going to spell disaster, when either Kleba is going to hit the three or can get the ball back to a Luka or a Brunson, and now they've got a wide open lane, and Donovan Mitchell's not a perimeter defender. Conley's, getting up there in years. So I have no idea what to expect from this team, because this pairing could really work if they can get stability from Karl-Anthony Towns. And at the 4, he's going to be able to be more naturally stretching the court. He'll be away from the basket a little bit more, where he can play to some of his strengths as a shooter. And if Gobert can just protect the middle, pull down 12, 13, 15 rebounds a game, and just be like, I'll get my 8 to 10 points, and I'm going to pull down as many rebounds as possible and block as many shots as possible. This team definitely has playoff potential. But when you look at the bench, I think there's just some questions. And I'm just not sure if Karl-Anthony Towns and Gobert, they are going to have to play at their peak ability for a full season, and neither one has been able to do that. So I just don't know if I'd bet on this team. But the talent alone is enough to definitely contend for a playing spot.
What do you think, Maverick? Is this team better or worse? I mean, they were 10 games above 500 last year, 7th seed. Have they made enough to get out of at least the play-in round, they'd have to be at least the 6th seed?
Well, whenever they made the trade for Gobert, there must have been a whiteboard with a bunch of pros and cons for acquiring him. The cons with Gobert it's partly with the trade and the system that they're going to have around Gobert. Number one of the reasons why they were able to get out of the play-in into the playoffs was the other pieces and their depth. Patrick Beverley, I felt like, changed the culture there. I think that he really motivated a lot of the players. Jared Vanderbilt, one of the better defenders, one of the most underrated players and underrated defenders in the NBA. And Malik Beasley, just a volume shooter, volume scorer, someone who can kind of come off your bench and kind of be a little bit of a microwave. You lose all of that. And you lose the ability to play a consistent 5-out, spaced-out offense. Do you know who benefits from that mostly? It's the guards. It's D'Angelo Russell and Anthony Edwards, both of these guys who are wanting to get into the paint, wanting to create off the dribble, and want to create for others by just driving and kicking. You now lose that ability by acquiring Gobert. You now have to have Gobert clog the paint and play in constant pick and rolls, which this team is not accustomed to. Cat is a player who is going to want to pick and pop the majority of the time. He's not going to roll every single time like Gobert is. Now you have to get accustomed to that system. I understand Gobert is a multiple-time defensive player of the year. I understand that he's an elite interior defender, and he is going to improve that aspect of this team. But when are we going to come to the point where we say that Minnesota might have lost more than they got back with Gobert, because they did not improve the depth that they lost with the trade, and they lost that system that really got him out of the play-in. That spaced-out offense got him out. So now you lose that with, better defense. But how much better defense? Because we're still going to have to deal with Cat. He's going to play the 4, which means he has to defend the 4. And most 4s in the NBA currently are creators off the dribble. So, it's a tough team to predict. I like the individual talent on the team, and I think it's enough to get back into the playoffs, definitely in the play-in. But there are a lot of questions that need to be answered come the season starts.
Yeah. And, really, again, this is another team where you look at the starting 5, well, not bad, pretty nice. But then you look beyond that, and, Kyle Anderson is a nice piece, because he's versatile, can do a lot of things for you. I guess my question is, who's going to replace Beasley's, 6-man microwave offense? And from a fantasy perspective, I'm going to put my money on Jalen Noel, University of Washington. He's been in the league for a few years, can play a little bit at the point, and he can. He's had some moments where he can fill it up. He certainly was a big time scorer at University of Washington. So I'm thinking that if he steps into that role, but I think this team's going to have problems defensively. Obviously not in the interior, but as Matt pointed out, Towns is not the ideal defender. He, at the 5 or the 4, but probably worse at the 4. McDaniels, Edwards. McDaniels definitely has a lot of upside as a defender, but I think he'll be a consistent starter this year. So, you might see some increased fantasy production from him. He's always been a consistent underachiever so far, in his career, but seems to have his act together now. But Russell isn't really a lockdown defender, and Edwards, his defense, comes and goes. But he certainly has the potential to be a very good defender. But I think they're probably going to end up, when it's all said and done, I think they're going to probably end up maybe getting a win or 2 more, and maybe they avoid the play-in scenario. But and maybe depending on, who they match up in the first round, they move into the following round. But I think it's tough to see this team, making a super long run just because, really, once you get past Kyle Anderson, then you're starting to say, okay, there's not much that really, the depth just isn't there.
Anthony Edwards is going to have to evolve into a undisputed superstar for them to make a run, in my opinion.
Yeah,
because you can't trust Cat. It's been proven time and time again. I'm out on until I see it. So if Edwards takes that 3rd-year jump and becomes a bona fide killer at the 2, who just is an unguardable offensive weapon and is willing to commit to the defensive side of the ball and take on those tougher assignments, then there's a chance they make some noise. But as it stands, he's he's giving you 25, but then there's going to be lapses. I mean, let's also not forget, in the playoffs, they were probably the worst team in terms of just IQ. They just were so poorly it's a combination of poorly coached, lack of IQ on the court. Losing Patrick Beverley, they now don't have that guy who can be like, hey, get in line. We need to be doing things this way. And this team hasn't won enough prior to him for them to now lose that. I think you gave them kind of a leader that they could rally behind, and now you've taken that. So if Edwards or Cat, I'm not even going to say Cat, if Edwards can't ascend to that role, I don't know. This team will shoot themselves in the foot more often than not.
Yeah. And that's the thing, there's a collection here of guys that historically have been, they've never, even Anthony Edwards is never known for, at Georgia, his effort came and went, D'Angelo Russell's never been like 110% guy. Jaden McDaniels has been a classic underachiever. And we know, about Towns. Gobert is about the only one I don't think has ever been criticized for not giving it his all. But yeah, so it is a weird collection of characters. So now we move on to the Denver Nuggets, who managed to finish 6th last year in the conference despite having some health issues. They've shaken up the roster a lot. Gone's Monte Morris, Will Barton, Jermichael Green, Austin Rivers. What they gained was Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Bruce Brown, Ish Smith, DeAndre Jordan, and of course their rookies. They have Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, and Colin Gillespie, who wasn't drafted, but they immediately signed him to a 2-way contract. Unfortunately, he suffered a significant knee injury, I believe, in Summer League or just before Summer League. So there's a good chance he won't play this year, unfortunately. So Mav, what do you make of Denver Nuggets? Are they title contenders now that they have Jamal Murray back, Michael Porter back?
When Jamal Murray and Michael Porter come back to their full form, which I don't think is going to happen until really mid-season. I mean, it's been a while since they played NBA basketball. I'm still not a fan of Michael Porter's basketball IQ. I've been on him about this for a while. But next to Jokic, he hides it pretty well. I am really excited about the additions of KCP and Bruce Brown. I think both of those players are used to playing in offenses that utilize cutting to the basket and are pretty versatile. The team overall is, I mean, it's pretty deep. Ish Smith is used to playing that backup point guard. I mean, Jeff Green surprised people last year just because, I mean, he's just so consistent at his age. I mean, it's been, I think, 15 seasons. He's just the same Jeff Green, just role-playing Jeff Green.
Uncle Jeff, they used to call him in Brooklyn.
I mean, it's a very talented team. It was so impressive to see how Jokic got that team to the 6th seed. Now you're just adding all-stars, more depth, more shooting, utilize cuts more with players who finish around the rim better. It's going to be an exciting season for Denver. I think that this team is going to finish first in the division, and they have a pretty good chance to finish at the top of the West.
Okay, Drew, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I do agree. I think that this is the team to beat in this division. And I also think that this team, I can't see championship yet, but I definitely think this team is going to I think this is a very legitimate threat to get to the Western Conference Finals. I don't think that's a hot take at all. And it wouldn't shock me if it all clicks together. If it all clicks for this team, they stay healthy, the additions do what they're supposed to do, Jamal Murray doesn't miss a beat, and Michael Porter finally starts to live up to some of that hype. This squad has, I think, finals aspirations. But I'm going to temper that, and I'm going to say Western Conference Finals is definitely in this team's near future. I love Jokic. I'm a huge Jokic fan. I've been a defender of the Jokic MVP train for now what it feels like forever, and for the last 2 years. To sit there and talk about, oh, they only won one game and the team's not that good. Imagine if Nikola Jokic was on this team last year. This guy is a walking threat to be a triple-double. He can score from everywhere, and in my opinion, he's probably top 3, if not the best passer in basketball, and he just happens to be 7 foot tall and play the center. Aaron Gordon is a guy I'm very familiar with. He's from my neck of the woods. I watched him play in high school. And while he's never developed the way that I think, we all might have liked coming out of Arizona, he has now really established himself as a legitimate defender at the 4 with great athleticism, can give you just enough scoring punch where you have to respect his ability. I mean, he's a 14, 15 point per game kind of guy. Jamal Murray is an absolute bucket. He's got a killer instinct to him. So I'm a big Jamal Murray guy. And I love the additions. I think Bones Highland is going to be able to take that step and is going to be great in that 6th man kind of bench scoring role. Mav said it, Ish Smith, unspectacular, but a solid backup point guard. And I think KCP and Bruce Brown are great additions. I love Bruce Brown and what he gave the Nets. I think he's only going to be better here because there'll be a little bit more stability on this team. So he gives them a great guy that they can plug at that 2 or 3. And KCP's kind of been on the slight downward trajectory for a while now, but he kind of had a little bit of a career revival last year. Played 77 games, shot damn near 40% from 3, 13 points a game, 2 assists, a couple rebounds. So he's obviously going to be called upon. I mean, you look at this starting lineup, he's going to be the 5th option. And if you look at the team as a whole, he's probably like the 8th or 9th option offensively when you consider Bruce Brown and Bones. So I love this team. I love Jokic. My only knock is I'm not a fan of their draft at all. I like Christian Braun. I think eventually he'll figure it out because he plays super hard. He's a great rebounder, but he's not ready to be an impact player. With Giuseppe hurt, that kind of just whittles down their point guard depth a little bit. I thought he'd be a good add for his shooting ability and playmaking IQ. And I'm just not sold on Peyton Watson. I don't think Peyton Watson will suit up for this team at all, barring extreme injuries, because he's just not ready to play. He wasn't ready to play college basketball last year. Not ready to play NBA basketball for a team that's aspiration is the Western Conference Finals. But yeah, this team wins the division. I think this team wins it at least probably 1 to 2 series in the playoffs. I'm pretty confident I'm booking that.
Yeah, I agree. I think probably what separates them from, say the Warriors and the Clippers is the bench is still looking a little thin, especially from in the scoring department. I really think they need Highland to, really be a strong, bench guy, could give them 15 a night. And I don't know if he's ready to do that. One guy I think is going to step up, which would be a relief to Denver fans. It would be Zeke Naji out of Arizona. I think he's going to be able to give them consistent minutes at the 5 this year. Guy's a super athlete. The one thing he lacks and this team lacks really, is a good rim protector. You really don't want DeAndre Jordan playing a lot of minutes, and he's about the only shot blocker on this team. So now she's really better suited to play the 4. And so maybe they'll make a move to get a legitimate somebody better than DeAndre Jordan to be behind Joker. I don't know.
They could sign me behind DeAndre Jordan at this point. That guy is done. He should not be getting NBA minutes. I'm sorry. The fact that he made a first-team All-NBA still has to be one of the biggest what the hells in NBA history.
Yeah, so, you look at that bench, though. Ish Smith, not a scorer. Bruce Brown, not a scorer. Jeff Green, he's a little too old to be your 6th man, So they definitely need something there. And but if Highland pops, but that's a lot of pressure on one guy. And then we're assuming that Jamal Murray, Michael Porter are going to stay healthy. And Porter has always been an injury risk every year. So, but if they do, I still think they're a year or two away, but definitely are top 3, top 4 in the conference. The last team in division is the Utah Jazz, which have made 1,000 moves. This is a team that won 49 games last year, 5th in the West. Not going to do that this year. They've lost Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, Royce O'Neal, Daniel House, Hassan Whiteside, Hancho Hernan Gomez, Eric Pascal, Trent Forrest. They've added Colin Sexton, Laurie Marketing, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, Taylor Horton-Tucker, Stanley Johnson, and then the rookies they have are Ochai Agbaji, Walker Kessler, Simone Fontecchio. I think I'm saying that right. Right, and he is actually a veteran European player, but will be an NBA rookie. I think he's close to 30 years old. And Johnny Juzang. So Utah has a lot of interesting pieces, might have some fantasy value, but man, this roster looks nothing like it did before, and we still may see more moves. Michael Conley, Jordan Clarkson, Malik Beasley, Rudy Gay, all could be traded, or maybe even perhaps maybe like in a case like Rudy Gay, maybe they'll buy his contract out. But there's some interesting pieces here too. We're talking, lottery picks with Marketing, Agbaji, Sexton, Walker Kessler was close to being a lottery pick. As Mav pointed out, Jared Vanderbilt is, he's a candidate to perhaps be, defensive player of the year. Maybe if he ever got certainly, all defensive type player plays at that level. And you have Clarkson and Beasley, who are both like 6th man of the year type of guys. And then you have high draft picks in Alexander Walker and Jared Butler. So, what is this bunch going to do, Drew?
Yeah, not a lot.
After all that, not a lot.
This is a team. Guy in this, my fear of this team, every single guy in this team is already probably looking for a way out of this team, and so there might be some great individual performances. I mean, Colin Sexton's probably a lock to average 20 points per game because somebody has to. I think it's going to be Ochai is going to get to kind of show some stuff at the small forward, but it might be too much responsibility too early. I mean, he's still a rookie, an older rookie, but still a rookie. Marketing, I think, definitely showed promise with the Cavs last year. I mean, when they played those jumbo lineups, he actually held his own. So I think marketing stands to gain quite a bit of a value bump from this transition because they're going to need him to score. So he's going to get to showcase maybe some scoring chops. And he's going back to the 4. I mean, they had him playing the 3 in some situations. At the 4, that's probably his more natural position. So I think that'll be good for him. I mean, there's depth everywhere. I mean, they go 2-3 deep at every position. I mean, look at the shooting guard. You got Sexton. Clarkson's a 6th man of the year. And you got, THT, who for the life of him could never, hold on to a starting job or significant minutes with the Lakers. But I mean, you look at the West and you're like, how is this team going to compete? They have no bona fide star. Every other team that is worth anything does. They're super young. I mean, they're going to be trading people. Malik Beasley's the guy that people are going to have eyes on for a trade candidate for teams that want a bit of a scoring punch. Conley for teams that are looking to maybe stabilize the point guard position and get the last out of him. He's probably only got a year or 2 left in him of serviceable play. Kelly Olynyk is a guy people are going to look at to, maybe reinforce their back or their front court. And, I think the Jazz would be open to that and just say, hey, if Walker Kessler shows enough, they might just be willing to part with him and elevate Kessler to a starting role. This team is no threat to make any noise, in my opinion. 49 wins is, if anyone thinks that they're going to even sniff 30 wins, you're probably crazy. I mean, I'm being brutally honest here, but there's going to be a lot of guys that we're talking about right now that won't be on this team because there's going to be a lot of great trade bait for those teams that need to reinforce themselves for a playoff push. But I'm not going to be tuning into many Jazz games. I'll tell you that.
Maverick, I'm going to play the devil's advocate. And I'm going to say, what if Jared Butler, starts to live up to what we thought he was a potential lottery pick before he got hurt before the draft. What if Jared Butler, plays decently? Sexton, we know, can put up 20 points a game. We could see Abaji putting up 15 points a game. We could see Markkanen putting up 17 or 18. We could see Olynyk giving you, 12 and 8. Or Kessler, maybe Kessler takes over and gives you 10 and 10 and 3-4 block shots a game. Why can't this team be competitive on some nights? I mean, I could make an argument that this lineup looks a hell of a lot better than Oklahoma City's.
Because the front office doesn't want them to. The front office does not want to win. That's going to be the problem. They do not want these guys to play well. But sorry.
No, I was going to just say that I think you're going to see a lot of players being rested, and a lot of them are going to be out for significant time for them to lose games. I think the Jazz are going to be surprisingly bad. I think that they're just going to be a really bad team, either with moves that they make or just players that are just resting or are hurt for a significant time. I thought Drew made an interesting point when we were talking about OKC. If they didn't get the first or second overall pick in this year's draft, they would package up some of their picks in order to move up, just a fantastic deal for the other team. Utah could do the same thing. If they keep all their assets, Clarkson, Kessler, Conley, Sexton, all these assets that they have the picks in order to make that same move with the players. I could see something like that happening if they don't like the deals that they're getting the beginning of the season or at the trade deadline. So look out for something like that. Other than that, the team is going to be pretty bad, in my opinion.
See, that's what that's where I don't, how many teams would love to have Jordan Clarkson or Malik Beasley coming off their bench? How many people would love to have Jared Vanderbilt coming off their bench? This is what's going to be coming off the bench for this team. A lot of the teams we've talked about today don't have that good a bench.
But the problem is the starters aren't a big upgrade. Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson could career-wise are looking like they're going to be kind of the same player. I like Ochai as a rookie, but like there's an argument to be made that Malik Beasley should be starting over Ochai in terms of just NBA readiness and NBA contribution. Vanderbilt, Laurie Markkinen, kind of the same conversation. Olynyk, Kessler said the gap between the starter and the bench is so minimal that the bench guy is great, but it's like if you they're just interchangeable pieces.
Yeah, I hear you.
They don't have the guy. Now, if this team had one legitimate star on this team, if you gave them a Steph Curry or you gave them a Paul George, now you might be thinking, hey, with their
buy-in, they could maybe make some noise. But I just don't think that this team has anyone that they can rally behind and carry them when they need to be carried. I feel a lot of guys that can just be rotated and swapped, but there's just not a big enough gap between bench and starter to where the bench is actually a benefit. Because any given night you can just swap them, which sounds good on paper, but in the NBA you need the guy that you need the one guy to carry you and everyone to come along for the ride. And I am not betting money on Clarkson or Sexton or Beasley to carry me in the Western Conference, at least.
Gotcha. That makes sense. All right. So next we'll move over to the Southwest Division. We'll talk about the Dallas Mavericks, which coincidentally are Mavericks' favorite team. So they were finished fourth in the West, seemingly with magic tricks, because when you look at their rosters, it wasn't loaded with talent. And you can make an argument that they have less talent, or at least no better talent this year. I'll let Maverick comment on that, but they lost Jalen Brunson, Boban, and that's about it. They gained Christian Wood and JaVale McGee, and they added rookie Jaden Hardy from G League Ignite. And so far, he's been having a rough ride of it, and probably it's a couple years away. So, Mav, what do you think of the Mavericks? Can they win that many games again this year? I mean, they do get Tim Hardaway back, but they've lost Brunson, and Tim Hardaway is no spring chicken. In fact, not many players on this team are spring chickens. Most of them, beside Doncic, are around 30 years old. The key players.
So I understand that there was no real improvement as far as individual talent for this team. But I'm going to tell you right now, no team should want to be matched up with this Dallas Mavericks team. Here's why. Number one, Jalen Brunson, as great as he was last year and his improvement as a ball handler and a mid-range shooter, his play style did not fit what this team needed. He was able to get picked on a lot defensively, and you could really argue that his development was from the Mavericks system of just straight up pick and roll, 5 out, especially in the playoffs whenever they decided to sit Dwight Powell and put Maxi Kleber in for 35 minutes each game. That 5 out offense created so much space for Brunson. I appreciate what Brunson did, especially in that Utah Jazz series. But Christian Wood and JaVale McGee are going to be extreme improvements as long as the system changes. Luka Doncic has always been extremely successful in pick and roll systems. Whenever he played in Real Madrid, whenever he played with the pick and roll with Walter Tavares, and whenever Slovenia brought in Mike Tobey and started running pick and roll almost every possession with him, it was unbelievably efficient. Keep in mind that the Dallas Mavericks, for the past, I believe, 5 years, ever since Luka was drafted, Dwight Powell was their starting center. Great roller, not a good enough individual talent at center to win a championship. Keep in mind, they went to the Western Conference Finals. Now you bring in 2 rollers. JaVale McGee, one of the better paint protectors in the NBA. Statistically, he was one of the best last year with the Phoenix Suns. And Christian Wood, not a defensive guru by any means. And he's not expected to be either. but he is expected to be one of the offensive powerhouses on this team. Bringing him off the bench is a smart move, and playing him next to Maxi Kleber, someone who is able to play both on the perimeter and in the inside on defense, Maxi is. Christian Wood is going to be looked at to score on the outside, both off the dribble and in the interior, and utilize his dribble pull-up to his advantage with this team, because this team is going to have just as much space or even more than last year. Keep in mind, Jalen Brunson was not lighting up the world last year from the three-point line. In fact, in the Golden State series, Draymond Green was the person that was guarding Jalen Brunson, and Draymond Green, all he did on defense was just sag off of him a little bit and force him to take those dribble pull-ups from either far mid-range shots or three-point pull-ups.
But can't you make the same argument about Dinwiddie, who's never been much of a three-point shooter himself, who's now going to be starting in his place?
Absolutely. But it was reported, I believe it was Kidd, who said a couple of days ago that Dinwiddie would move back to the second unit. That's why in the preseason game against the Orlando Magic, the second half, he was playing with the second unit. So now we don't know who's going to be starting at the two. It's not going to be Tim Hardaway Jr. or Spencer Dinwiddie. What I'm excited about is the Josh Green development. I think Josh Green looks extremely confident. They live streamed one of the practices in the Mavs facility. He looked great as an NBA player. And rookie Jaden Hardy, he's a good creator off the dribble. He needs to work on his shot selection and his overall efficiency. But with more reps and more time, especially if Kidd is going to throw him into the fire, he could develop pretty quickly into another ball handler as well.
Have they explained to Jaden, by the way, that when your team doesn't have the ball, you have to run down to the other end of the court?
Oh, he's gonna have to learn really quickly. But I think
he's got that G League mentality of I only, the only one to stay on one end of the court.
I would be really excited to watch this team. I think the team fits perfectly next to Luka. I don't think that Dorian Finney-Smith and Reggie Bullock they not get the love they deserve, especially on the defensive end. Dorian Finney-Smith is one of the best defenders in the NBA, especially on the perimeter, and he guards the best player consistently night in and night out. He needs to get more love. I think that finally the Dwight Powell playing center is over, which is long overdue. I think JaVale McGee is going to be much better on both ends. And Christian Wood, early Sixth Man of the Year race candidate, he's going to have a great year next to Luka, and he's going to contribute his 40% three-point shooting to the best of his ability playing on this team. I really think that this team could make a lot of noise in the playoffs this year, and I have this team winning the division this season.
Okay. Now, one more question for you. Now, we have on our depth charts, we don't list them based on who actually starts games. We list them by who we think is going to play the most minutes. And you would probably agree that it's probably proper of us to list Christian Wood. He'll probably end up playing more minutes than JaVale McGee. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I think that Kidd likes to run this Frank Vogel type of center rotation. He puts a center in for about 2 or 3 minutes and subs him out almost immediately. He did it in the playoffs last year. I think it's going to be a similar situation this year. I think Christian Wood is going to get a lot of 4 or 5 minutes very early on. A lot of noise has been made about him not starting, but he's going to be playing starting minutes for sure.
Right.
He's going to have to.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to. Yeah. So who would be your fantasy pick on this team? I mean, there's a lot of candidates for
Luka
people.
Doncic?
Well, no, I'm saying for people who, they might benefit from the absence of Brunson. Do you think Christian Wood, he had a little bit of an off year with Houston last year. Of course, Josh Green hasn't done a lot, in his first couple of years in the league, but he's very athletic, very intelligent player. And then we have Dinwiddie, who should get more minutes. Who do you like to be the fantasy producer here?
I think Josh Green is going to have a big year. His overall improvement on the ball, he looks much more confident in preseason, and he's always been able to pass the ball pretty well too. So as long as Josh Green is confident with the ball and is an efficient three-point shooter, he doesn't need to be anything crazy, but as long as he's shooting, I would say around 36 to 38% from three, he could have a great fantasy year because he's going to get a lot of minutes after the Jalen Brunson departure. And if you're just looking for an efficient basketball player, someone who's going to get the ball on the wing, who's going to be open and is a three-point shooter, Tim Hardaway Jr. Is going to continue his efficient shooting with the Mavs this year and really be a big threat off the bench, especially as a shooter.
Okay. All right. I talked to Josh Green at length at the G League Elite Camp. I was so impressed. One of the more impressive interviews I've ever had with his intelligence. He just seems to have the right attitude. And I know his freshman year at Arizona was pretty choppy, but he does have the skill. I think he has the desire, and I think he has the intelligence to be a real solid NBA player. I'll throw in another player who impressed me. Was a player we mentioned before, was one of my favorite interviews of all time, was with Ochai Agbaji. Another kid that really seems to have his head on straight and really is says all the right things, and we could tell he does all the right things. So, Drew, my question to you is I'm predicting, I know last week I said the Lakers would be the 8th team in, but I've given that more thought since last week, and I think actually the Lakers are going to drop out of the top 8 and are going to have to play their way in. But I think one of the teams they're going to be fighting for the 8th spot, which Mavs not going to want to hear, but I think it's this team. But I grossly underestimated the Mavs last year. So, I look at this roster and I'm like, wow, beside Luka, there's not much here. So do you think the sum is greater than the parts? Or are they going to get over 50 wins again?
Yeah, I think 50 wins is probably, they'll probably be in that 50 to 52 again range. I think the team's upside is capped because they don't have a secondary star. And like we look at all the top teams in the league, they have a secondary, like all-star caliber, if not the top teams, like a superstar caliber player. They don't have that. The thing that scares me with this roster, the one thing I like the depth pretty much at every position, except the one where Luka is at. If something, and I pray that he doesn't. He looks like he's taking care of his body. He looks in great shape when he was playing over in Europe. If anything happens to Luka, not just because he's their best player by far, but their point guard depth is extremely shaky. And on a team like this, where it is kind of the sum of the parts, your primary decision maker, regardless if it's a superstar or not, has to be pretty dialed in. And I do not trust any of the 3 guys we have listed behind Luka. But I do think, I'm not the type of person, I hate people that predict injury because you can't predict it. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, injury is going to ruin this team. If they stay healthy, yeah, this team I think is, I would say pretty much a lock for the playoffs because Luka's that type of player. And I think there's just enough between Dinwiddie, Green, Hardaway, Bullock, Dorian Finney, Kleba, Bertans, Christian Wood, McGee, Powell. There's enough guys that any given night, he's going to have 1 or 2 guys come along for the ride with him. And that's all that he needs. Luka will give you his 25, 27, 30 a game. And I'm pretty confident that with all of those people, he can count on at least 1 or 2 other guys giving him that extra 20 points a game. It might not be the same guy every night, but it's going to be a constant rotation, and that's all they need.
Right. Maybe they should get in touch with Utah about Mike Conley.
Honestly, he would be a good – you just need somebody to alleviate. I know Dinwiddie can probably pick up some ball handling duty, but like he's a scorer. That's kind of what he does. It just worries me because it's not just no depth. It's 3 guys that have either like no NBA experience or are just not good, like just not good basketball players. Right.
I hear you. All right, moving on to the team that won the division last year, the Memphis Grizzlies. They have lost DeAnthony Melton, Kyle Anderson, and Jarrett Culver. They gained Danny Green, who we mentioned is out till February, and maybe even longer. And the rookies, they added a whole boatload in Jake LaRavia, David Roddy, Kennedy Chandler, Vincent Williams, and Kenny Lofton Jr. Lofton and Vincent Williams, by the way, are signed to two-way contracts. So we also mentioned that Jaren Jackson is starting the year injured with another foot injury. So something is telling me that this team is just, they overachieved last year and they're going to take a step back. I'm not even sure I can put my finger on it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think 56 wins isn't going to happen again. I think in the ballpark more of 50. Again, I think they're more of a 50, 52 win team. I think this division as a whole actually has some pretty competitive teams in it. I mean, the Grizzlies, Mavs, and we'll get to them later, but the Pelicans are all teams that I think are very playoff caliber. None of them scare me as like a championship contender, but they're all tough. I think a lot of teams are getting better. And I think overachievement is a really good way to put it because, I mean, the big storyline last year obviously was first and foremost that they finished second in the West, but secondly that they actually were like some absurd, they won like 80+% of their games when Ja didn't play. I just don't think that's sustainable in the NBA for like long stretches. I like a lot of the pieces on this team. I love Ja Morant. I just love the competitive fire that he plays with. But if you want to talk about injury concerns, his frame and the way he plays gives me some pause. I mean, he plays in the air and he's 180 pounds.
He's reckless. He's reckless with his body.
That worries me. And you can say all you want, oh, they won without him. They won without him. Well, if Jaren Jackson's now missing time and he has been the definition of banged up, I mean, that is an injury risk every time he steps on the court. If Ja doesn't, if something happens to Ja, I love the individual pieces. I think Tyus Jones is a great backup point guard. I know if Cam was here, he'd be hyping up Kennedy Chandler. Brooks and Bane are great 2-3 guys. You know, Green is definitely on the back nine of his career, but, you know, he can give you a little bit of something, you know. Zaire Williams. LaRavia has been a bit of a disappointment. I thought he'd be a little bit better, but what we've seen so far. And, like, I think they have pieces at every position, but I think overachievement last year was kind of the name of the game. I think this team's going to win 50-plus games based on talent alone. You know, again, when you have a Ja Morant, you have a Desmond Bane, a Dylan Brooks, there's enough firepower, especially on the perimeter, to where you're going to beat teams, especially as other teams get injured, the season wears on. Because they are young. Like, that is an advantage. A lot of key positions are young, but, you know, I don't see this team. I don't see this team making the same noise it made last year. I think their ceiling is probably win a playoff series and get bounced in the second round.
Yeah, I think ultimately they need another piece.
Yeah,
another piece. And I don't know if you want Jaren Jackson being one of your top three.
I'm kind of out on him.
Yeah, I am too. I think he's soft. I think he's overrated. He's always hurt. He doesn't use his body to his potential. He cannot stay out of foul trouble. And everyone
talks about the shooting and the rim protection, but if you're not on the court because you're either fouls over or hurt, it doesn't matter. Right,
exactly. And yeah, I just don't think he maximizes the physical tools he's been given, and he tries to play too much like a guard when he's not. Yeah, and then defensively, you know, if he's not blocking a shot, he's fouling. You have two options with him. So, Mav, what are your thoughts on the Grizz?
Yeah, something just feels off to me with this team. It might be the DeAnthony Melton and Kyle Anderson loss. I think that hurts their depth more than people are giving credit to. The Jaren Jackson injury, man, it just hurts to see. Because I know that he has had foul trouble, and I know that, you know, you could probably label him soft, but his overall talent is still there. I think he fits really well with this team, and he's not coming into the season healthy, or he's not going to be in shape either. And, I mean, his replacement is probably going to be Brandon Clark, someone who's, you know, an athletic, rolling big, but how important is that going to be whenever you have Steven Adams? I mean, and I mean, with Steven Adams, let's just be honest. He was played off the floor last playoffs. Last playoffs, he probably will get played off the floor again in the regular season, in the playoffs as well. So I don't know. I think the Zaire Williams development could be key here. I think it could be an X factor for some depth. But other than that, something just feels off. I think that 45 to 50 wins is where I would put this team right now. I don't trust Jaren Jackson Jr. coming into shape whenever he comes back. I think he'll probably get some he'll probably go back to shooting consistently, maybe come playoff time. And Steven Adams, I just haven't been a fan of Steven Adams for a while now. I think it's easy to play him off the floor. Fantastic screener for Ja Morant. But other than that, defensively, I mean, it's like just walking in quicksand for him. So it's tough. Now, fantasy-wise, if you have Ja Morant on the board, he's going to have an amazing individual year. I think there's not many pieces on this team. Maybe Dylan Brooks, who's going to take the ball away from him. I mean, it's going to be an incredible individual year for Ja Morant. So if you have a chance to pick him, bearing injury, he could be one of the top performers this year.
Right. Oh, definitely. He's top 20 fantasy performer. No doubt. I think Tyus Jones is probably going to take a tick up with DeAnthony Melton gone. I'm pretty sure about that. I think you're very accurate in saying that Melton and Anderson, I think that's kind of why this team looks weaker. And so the people that have to, pick it up are Tyus Jones and, as you said, Zaire Williams, who definitely has the potential. Very talented young man. The guy who's the favorite right now to start for Jaren Jackson while he's out is Santi Aldama, who was the 30th overall pick last year. Yeah, I think it was last year. Didn't do much last year. Definitely playing solid in the preseason. Impressive. Another stretch. Big. He's close to 7 foot. Can block some shots. He's just one of those bigger guy. He plays the European style of ball. Decent passer, decent shot blocker, rebounder. So, I wouldn't be surprised, given how annoying Jackson can be with his foul trouble or whatever, that maybe Aldama stays in the starting lineup just because they say, hey, Jaren, since you can't stop fouling out, we're just going to have you come off the bench to see if that works. So as far as the collection of rookies they have, Jake LaRavia has really struggled in summer league, and that's continuing in the preseason. The one rookie I think has a chance to make his mark is David Roddy, and that's one of Cam's favorites. Cam is a huge David Roddy supporter, and we are too. We had him significantly ranked higher than most other sites. Of course, Memphis even had him higher than we did, taking him in the early 20s. So we considered Roddy like a borderline, early first round, early second round, late first round type of guy. But I think he went 23rd overall. All right, so moving on. And by the way, I think Memphis is going to be competing for, with teams like Minnesota for the middle of the pack, for like the 4th, 5th, 6th seed in the West. So now we move on to the Houston Rockets, a team where we really love their draft, which probably won't necessarily mean a lot of more wins for them, at least not right this year. Last year, they only had 20 wins. They lost, of course, Christian Wood, was traded to Dallas, Dennis Schroeder, who ended up signing with the Lakers, and John Wall, who signed with the Clippers. They added Boban, Trey Burke, Marcus Chris, but those guys were traded. Sorry. Willie Cauley-Stein, he was just signed, but nobody really of any big impact. The interesting additions are the draft picks. Jabari Smith, Tari Eason, Ty Washington, and they also have Trevor Hudgens on a 2-way contract, who's also a rookie point guard. So, Maverick, look over this team, you see a lot of talent, especially offensively. Jabari Smith's defense will definitely be needed because not many other guys on this team like to play defense except for maybe Jae'Sean Tate. So what do you make of Houston? How many more wins can they get over 20? I assume you think they've improved.
Yeah, I think that they have improved, but not much to the win column. Jabari Smith, I think, is going to take on that defensive role that they desperately need without an issue. I think that's the type of player that he is and the type of person that he is. Tari Easton, I mean, I really like him too. Just watching him, he's going to be another versatile defensive threat, and eventually if he just gets his shot right, I mean, he really could. I mean, he could start some games. I think that they have to make a choice with Kevin Porter. I think that's like a real issue that I have with this team. I'm not buying into the Kevin Porter point guard thing. There should probably be another point guard whose main focus is just facilitating and not being so much as a volume shooter, especially with Jalen Green. And that's, of course, if Houston completely buys into Jalen Green as well. I mean, do you believe that Jalen Green is going to be a primary scorer on a championship roster? I'm not completely sure. Of course, he's going into his second year, so
I mean, I think the guy has all-star potential.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I mean, he's definitely got to improve on the defensive sides. That definitely has to improve his efficiency. You know, I was looking over Ignite. You know, the players have come out of Ignite so far, and I think he's been the most talented of the group. But he's got a ways to go.
Yeah, he and the Rockets also have a lot of young depth as well. I mean, Josh Christopher played, I think, pretty well in the summer league. I mean, Jayshawn Tate's going to be coming off the bench according to our depth charts. Sengun is an excellent center, and I think he shows a lot of promise, especially as like a mid-post passer. And with Coach Steven Silas leading this team, and his offensive genius, I think that this team offensively could be pretty fun to watch. Not going to win many games,
right?
But they will be on the highlight reel, definitely.
Oh yeah, they're going to put up points.
Oh yeah.
You know, whether they make use of Eric Gordon or not, which I would assume it makes sense for them to trade him, you know, to somebody who needs some scoring off the bench. You know, another problem with this team is outside shooting. Not a lot of guys besides Jabari Smith are the type of guy you want consistently. You know, I mean, Sengun can hit some shots. Easton can hit some. Christopher's not very good. You know, Porter and Green are not the greatest. Yeah. So, Drew, what would you like to throw in here about the Rockets?
Yeah, I think this team's going to be super fun to watch. You know, I guess we've been saying in the past how the Hornets were a fun team to watch, young, kind of run and gun. This team is going to be an absolute blast to watch. Again, I'm not sold like Mav on Kevin Porter being a really efficient, high-level, you know, point guard at the NBA level, but he's going to put up numbers. Gordon will be off this team sooner rather than later. There's no doubt about it in my mind. So, I mean, it's going to be some combination of Josh Christopher and Ty Washington soaking up minutes there. Jalen Green, I think, is already showing that at worst, he's going to be a 20-point per game scorer in this league. You know, how efficient he becomes, what else he brings to the table. But I think power forward is where I'm most excited. We all have really high hopes for Jabari as kind of a scorer and defender, shooter. I mean, kind of a do-everything prospect. I know we went back and forth with him and Paolo at the number one spot, pretty much down to the wire. And if Cam was here, I know he'd be telling us all, I told you so about Tari Eason. He looks like the real deal. I think those two are
Tari too. We had him in lottery territory.
We did.
I think he finished 11th on our
he was board. Right outside the top 10, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And I know Cam said he would take him even higher. But I think that those two are going to be – I think those two could very quickly establish themselves as the best overall players on this team. I think Green's a more polished scorer probably overall than both of them right now. Plus, he has the advantage of a year in the league. These guys are coming in as rookies. And then I love the point Mav made. I think Sengun is a super underrated center. I actually rostered him in fantasy last year because he kind of does all the small things you want from a center, has solid scoring touch as well. So, yeah, defensively, this team's going to probably get torched by the good teams quite a bit. But I think games like a Houston Rockets and OKC game, I think is actually going to be pretty entertaining. There's a lot of young talent. And again, this is another team that will catch people in the doldrums of the season, you know, in February and March when teams are kind of just going through the motions. This is the type of team that if you're not careful, will just get into a scoring race with you. And because they're young and they're going to be chucking up shots, if they get hot, they can beat anybody on a given night with that offense. But defensively, man, they're going to be a sieve. They're going to give up quite a bit of points.
Agreed. Tari Eason, to continue the thought on him, he's actually, not only did he play better than Jabari in Summer League, he's played better than Jabari in the preseason. And when I look at this team, I'm not wondering if maybe their best lineup might be Porter and Green at the guards, Eason and Smith at the forwards, and Sengun at the center. Okay, now that's a really big lineup, height wise, and ultimately, I think what you rather have, like instead of a Kevin Porter at point with those guys, you rather have a guy like Shea or Giddey, somebody who will be more willing passer. And, I know Giddey isn't known for his defense. So I think ultimately what you'd like is a pass first, defensive oriented point guard. And I think that's the next piece this team needs. So we're going to move on to the Spurs. And of course, the Spurs snuck into the play-in last year. They only won 34 games. I personally think that this team is going to have trouble even getting to 30 wins this year. They lost, of course, their best player in DeJounte Murray. They also lost Lonnie Walker, Jock Landale. They added Gorgie Jang and Isaiah Roby. And the rookies they added were Jeremy Sohan, Malachi Branham, and Blake Wesley. Now, the one thing that obviously stands out to me is the only true point guard on this team is Trey Jones. To me, Trey Jones is a nice player to have coming off the bench. I just don't know. I just don't see if he, he's probably going to start for them, and he's probably going to give you some fantasy numbers for them. I think what they're also, you're going to be trying Josh Primo at the point when he's healthy. He's hurt right now. And also Blake Wesley. And neither of those guys have really spent a lot of time playing point guard in their prior career. And Blake Wesley has really been struggling in summer league and preseason. So Drew, when I look over this roster, I see a lot of talent. I mean, I see Romeo Langford and Joe Wieskamp, third string, so there's some talent there, but I
think out of all teams we talked about today, as blasphemous as it sounds, this might be the worst team. You look at OKC, they have a combination of young talent, and they still do have kind of a one player they can kind of, hitch that wagon to in Shea. You look at Houston. Offensively, we love the offensive firepower. There's going to be defensive questions, but when you have a young team, and that's kind of what generally tends to happen. Defense is usually what comes along, as they learn to adjust both their bodies and the mental aspects of playing defense. I look at this team, and outside of Jakob Poeltl and maybe Keldon Johnson, I don't think a single guy on this roster is a starter pretty much anywhere else in the NBA. And maybe I'd have to look at all the depth charts, but they have two guys that might start in a few teams. That's about it. So
I mean, Keldon Johnson is the best player on that team, and he certainly would start for pretty much anybody.
Sure.
Poeltl, solid player. He'd start for maybe half the
teams. Yeah.
Exactly. And everybody else, is like McDermott and Trey Jones. They're really backup players.
Oh yeah, and I love the rookies. I'm not a big Blake Wesley guy. I never have been, but I really like Malachi Branham. I like Jeremy Sohan for what they bring to the table. I remember Hugh talked about it a lot when we were doing the draftings. Sohan's a great piece to add because he's going to give you that defensive intensity and a guy that you can kind of build a defense around in terms of his switchability and energy. I think Branham's upside is along the lines of like a Chris Middleton. He could be, I think, a really good number 2 on a team one day. I think he shoots the ball well. He can score. He does a little bit of everything. But they're rookies. If you expect 2 rookies that were, kind of back end of the lottery, middle of the lottery guys to carry you, it's not going to happen. So, yeah, I think this team's going to be pretty bad. I don't know where they're going to generate offense from consistently. I don't know if they have anybody that they can, sick on the other team's best player defensively. So this is a matchup where teams with top tier talent, you're not going to be able to stop them. Fantasy wise, I would be targeting Keldon Johnson actually and Jakob, because somebody has to put up points and stats on this team. Jakob will probably pull close to 10 rebounds a game, and he'll probably get close to averaging a double-double if he stays with the Spurs out of necessity. Keldon Johnson, same thing. I think he's going to probably he might push to close to 20 points a game because somebody's got to put the ball in the bucket. But to be completely honest, and I can't believe I'm saying this by a Popovich-led team in the Spurs, this team could very well end up being the worst team in the West, and it wouldn't shock me.
Yep, I agree. Of the three rookies, Sohan, Branham, Wesley, I like Malachi Branham to have the best rookie season. Would you agree there?
Yeah, I think just because he's going to be able to fill the box score up in a variety of ways. Like Sohan's impact, while it'll be great defensively, he's very raw offensively. So they're not going to. He probably won't even start because he's just not going to be able to give them offensive contributions outside of rim running and like out in transition on the break.
Right.
And showcase that he could play alongside a guy like he played alongside EJ Liddell. He shot close to 40%, if not over 40% from three. Solid rebounding numbers for a two, decent passing numbers for a two. I think as Keldon Johnson draws the toughest assignments, he'll have some games where I think he gets some numbers because, again, by necessity.
Right. Maverick, who's the worst team in the league? Is it the Spurs or OKC?
Well, if I'm going to start by saying the Coach Popovich quote during media day: "Nobody here should go to Vegas with the thought of betting on us to win that championship." If your coach is saying that about your team, I think it is safe to say that you are probably the worst team in the NBA. I don't see where they get any offense. Keldon Johnson is going to get the ball a lot, and he's probably going to put up some points inefficiently. Defensively, Devin Vassell has some potential to show some on-ball defense. Jakob Poeltl proved to be a pretty solid interior defender last year. But other than that, man, it's rough. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a rough year, and they're going to be pretty bad. They're going to be pretty bad. There's not really much else to say.
I think they know what they were doing, though. I think this team purposely collected as much talent over the last couple of years as they could. They didn't care about the fit. There's like, the heck with the fit. I'm going to grab, the most talented players. And that's why they ended up with a bunch of like 6'5", 6'6", 6'4", talented, multi-talented, versatile type players. I think they're going to find out, does Romeo Langford have anything? Does Matt, is Josh Primo worth anything? They're going to give these guys a lot of run and see what they got. And they're not going to give a rat's ass about what the final score is. They just want to find out, what do we have? Because next year we're going to come away with probably either the first pick overall or the second pick overall. And we won't even have to try to do that. All we have to do is just play what we got, and we'll end up with one of the top two picks. All right. So the last team in the division is the New Orleans Pelicans, and they pretty much stood pat, except for they've added some rookies. They lost Tony Snell. They haven't really added anyone of significance. The rookies that are joining the team are Dyson Daniels, EJ Liddell, Darion Sebron, and John Butler. Now, Liddell, of course, got injured over the summer, tore his ACL, will most likely not play for the Pelicans this year. Very, very likely. And he has yet to be signed. So they still own his draft rights, but they haven't signed him. Sebron and Butler are two interesting talents, two guys that we had very close to being in the draft range. We had them like around, somewhere between 60 and 70 on our draft board. Neither of them were drafted, but they're both on two-way contracts, and I think those are nice additions for the Pelicans, two players to look at for development. And then, of course, Dyson Daniels, who's also somewhat of a project at this point. but could turn out to be an excellent big point guard. But Maverick, what do you make of this team? To me, when I look at them, they look pretty darn strong, assuming Zion's healthy.
Individually, this team is pretty loaded. Both, on the bench and their starting lineup. CJ McCollum, borderline all-star. Brandon Ingram, all-star. Jonas Valanciunas, borderline all-star. Herbert Jones, versatility on defense galore. Then off the bench, you have Jackson Hayes, solid big. Larry Nance, another solid, versatile big. Devontae Graham, a volume shooter to say the least, but if he's on, he's on. You also have Jose Alvarado. He can be at least some sort of pest off the bench, but it's still, to me, one of the most unpredictable teams in the NBA because I've seen it time and time again. When you don't have a proper floor general on the floor and a proper point guard, because right now we have slotted CJ McCollum to start at the one. He's used to playing with Damian Lillard at the one. He's only focused on mainly scoring. He's not really worried about anything else. And then Brandon Ingram is also probably going to be the secondary ball handler. He's a score-first player as well, decent distributor, but not enough to really consider a floor general by any means. I would assume with the talent on this roster, they're looking to do something in the playoffs, whether it's make it out of the first round, make some noise. Right now, it's tough to say because without that floor general, I think they're going to struggle a little bit. It's very similar to how the Clippers were in 2020 when they thought it would be okay with going with a Paul George, Kawhi ball handling lineup, playing Reggie Jackson, Reggie Jackson as mainly just a secondary guy. And they struggled. They struggled to create offense because it was two score-first guys who distributed second. It's just there's no guard depth. They have the talent. They have the talent to compete. And Coach Willie Green is also solid as well. He was able to put in a pretty good system for the injuries that they sustained. And if Zion comes into the season in shape and he looks good, that's another aspect that's going to be just it's a super loaded roster. There's just a lot of questions that I have with just fit. There's also injury concerns. A lot of the players on this team have been injured before. And just overall, are they going to be efficient enough on offense to really, make any noise? And then also, defensively, is there really anyone else that's going to be able to defend at a high level besides Herbert Jones? It's not like Zion was lighting the world on fire whenever he was still playing on the defensive end. He looked a little bit slow, and he wasn't really defending the interior as good as projected. So it's tough. It's tough. They have the talent. There's just a lot of questions on my end.
I hear that. Drew, now, Mav makes a great point where they don't really have a true NBA starting level point guard. McCollum's been the off guard for most of his career. Alvarado is a great floor general, but he's not the type of guy you want starting. However, they did draft a guy who's 6'7" and can pass the ball in Dyson Daniels, but I don't know if he's ready. Is that your biggest concern with this team? The lack of a point guard, or what do you think here?
The concern is it's twofold: lack of point guard, and obviously Zion Williamson. Until I see it, I'm not going to believe it. But I'm gonna, I'll play devil's advocate. I'm gonna buy into this team. I think, I'm not predicting them to win a championship, but they're going to improve. 36 wins. I can easily see them getting to 45. Easily, especially with their division. They've got two kind of cupcakes in their division. I'm going to buy into the talent. We do live in an era of positionless basketball, which plays for this team's favor. Now, the reason I'm going to say they don't have a championship caliber, window is because we saw what happened to the Celtics when they didn't have a true point guard in Marcus Smart. At some point you need someone to get the ball, slow things down, and they don't have a guy that will do that. But if you look at a core of McCollum, Ingram, Jones, Williamson, and Valanciunas, and every single one of those guys has a good to really good backup behind them, I think this team's going to be fine. They'll weather the storm if they have to. Now, obviously, if Zion ends up missing a significant amount of time, their ceiling drops exponentially. But I'm a big Dyson Daniels guy. Yes, I don't think he's going to be ready to come in and become a primary facilitator for a team with playoff aspirations and a team that's probably looking to win at least one series, if not maybe make a run and win two. But I think he's going to be fine. He came into this draft as one of the guys who I think most people thought, hey, safe pick, relatively safe floor based on his size and like his measurables, and then his skill set is going to work in the NBA to some degree. How much, we'll see. But I'm going to buy into this team. I'm going to give this team probably 45, 46 wins. I think they'll win at least 10 more games. If Zion stays healthy. And regardless of the point guard situation, when you get to the playoffs, it is about making shots and, executing your offense. And when you have Zion Williamson, who's going to get scored 20 plus a game, Brandon Ingram, who will score 20 plus a game, McCollum, who will score 20 plus a game, Valanciunas can give you 20 pretty easily. Devontae Graham can get hot. There's so many weapons that it's going to be hard to contain this team for a full series when the time comes. And then again, you have Herb Jones, who's going to be willing to defend. Alvarado is willing to defend. Valanciunas, while he's not a defender, he's a banger. He will not concede the post. He will contest. He will fight down low. So, yeah, I think this team's going to win at least 10 more games, 9-10 more games, and I think they're going to win a playoff series. I'm a big fan of their coach, Willie Green, and I think this team's developing he's cultivating the right mentality for guys that, Brad Ingram was kind of viewed as he's kind of soft, CJ kind of soft, and I think he's cultivating that mindset. And when you have rookies like Herb Jones, Alvarado, and Trey Murphy who are willing to come in and do the dirty work, and they're only going to be better, I'm going to give this team at least 9-10 more wins.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm going to tell you what, they did a pretty impressive job bringing the rookies along last year. And so let's just say Dyson Daniels has like a Herb Jones-like year this year. Wow.
If he plays Herb Jones-like minutes, and they're going to be freaking good. They'll literally go like 10 deep. 10, 11 deep.
And the funny thing of it is they're very similar type players, Dyson. And people forget that Herb Jones played a lot of point guard at Alabama.
I was very high on Herb Jones coming into the draft.
So he, Herb Jones, can be a secondary, playmaker as well. All right. So I've been hard on Zion on the show in the past. I'm buying that they're going to get, 50 to 60, maybe, at least 50 games out of him. And I think they're going to give Memphis a run for their money for the division. All right. So we have a full mailbag today, and we'll try. Let's see what we got here. We already answered one, but Jason asked, "Who has impressed you so far this preseason?" Okay, so that's it. He just wants to know who's impressed us. I have my answers. I've actually mentioned a couple of them, but I'll throw some guys out and I'll just list them off and I'll let you guys expand. Tyrese Maxey, Giddey, who I talked about, Trey Mann, who I talked about, Adama for Memphis. I talked about Sam Hauser. Sam Hauser looks like he might just pull it off for the Celtics and replace, give them a shooting big like Danilo Gallinari, who they lost to the injury. Tari Eason, who I mentioned, and two guys from Miami who really surprised me is Nikola Jovic, who we talked about a little bit last week. He's one of the younger guys in this draft class, and I just thought he'd be a little too soft, but I've really been impressed. He's a little tougher than I thought. And he might have more of an impact for Miami than we thought. And then a guy who was just a throw-in on the training camp roster, Jamal Cain. We've never even talked about Jamal on the show. He's not a super athlete, but he's a real crafty 3-level scorer. He's a wing type. But can score off the dribble, shoot. He's not outstanding in one aspect of the game, but he's a very crafty scorer. And so they just signed him to a 2-way contract, I believe, yesterday. So he's been impressive. I don't expect a huge impact from him, but the question was, who's impressed me? So I just told you. So how about you guys? You can certainly expand on any of the guys I didn't talk about. One thing I didn't say about Maxey is, what I've seen from him is he's bigger, he's stronger, and he's shooting better.
Yeah, I mean, I won't have a huge list just for the sake of time. The one guy to me that's been standing out, and I think not only is he been playing well, but it's extremely important that he takes the next level is Maxey, because he is the X factor for them. Because we know what Joel Embiid is. He's going to play his 60 games a year, 60, 65 if he's really healthy, and he's an MVP caliber talent. I think the days of James Harden scoring 25, 26 are done. Realistically, they're probably expecting more like 18 to 20 from him. But they're going to hope those assist numbers stay in that 8 to 10 a game range. Maxey is the key. If Maxey can become a bona fide 20 to 24, give or take, point per game score on an efficient clip, they're going to have a legitimate big three in Philly. And he is dominant. He's not just playing well. Offensively, he's dominating. Like, he's playing, I think I pulled it up. He's playing right under 15 minutes a game in 2 postseason games, and he's averaging 20 and a half points on 79% from the field and 71% from 3.
I did not realize that. Wow.
Yeah, he's dominating that, and that's according to Real GM. For those who want to stat check me, because at first I'm like NBA preseason game, he has been unstoppable offensively. I'm not saying he's going to do that in the NBA regular season. Right. It's not sustainable, but all these other guys are impressing, but they're generally playing on teams where they're not going to be on the best teams. Their expectations aren't super high. They're taking maybe a second-year lead. Eason and Jovic obviously are rookies, and they're showcasing, but they were first-round picks, so you're like, oh, okay. Tyrese Maxey is becoming a superstar, or at least an all-star, and is going to be key to any championship run in Philly at this point. So I think him showing that he's willing to step to that challenge is more important than a rookie on a bad team being like, hey, I'm good.
Right. Maverick, who's impressed you? And they don't have to be on the list I wrote down here. That's just my list. If there's somebody else that you like better, shoot away.
Yeah, I'm going to go a different direction. I'm going to say the combination of DeJounte Murray and Trae Young.
No.
I watched the Hawks and Bucks games, and I was extremely impressed with how well they played together.
Yes.
Trae Young, the second game, had 31 points at the half. And DeJounte Murray, the first game, had, I believe, close to a 20-point triple-double. They play really well together. And one of the issues I had with the Hawks was finding opportunities for John Collins. Well, DeJounte Murray and John Collins look great together. It's been a pleasant surprise for, I'm sure, Hawks fans. And I'm extremely impressed with how good Trae Young looks. Looks much more efficient, much quicker. It's going to be a pretty big year for him. And I expect the Hawks, if this continues on, to make some real noise in the East.
Yeah, good call. I agree. They have looked good together. All right, next question. Michael wants to know, which NBA teams are you the most and least excited to watch this season? Alrighty, Mav, you got to pick who you're most excited to watch and who you're least excited to watch.
Well, most excited, I think that there's 2 different ways to look at it. You can either look at it from the who's going to be playing the best basketball, who's going to be playing winning basketball, and who's just going to be really fun to watch with highlights and different types of plays such as that. I think for just winning basketball games, the Nuggets, we talked about them today. They're going to just be really good, just really efficient. Smart cuts, great basketball IQ overall on this team. If you're going to look for winning basketball, the Denver Nuggets are going to be right there. And I think, over in the East, I think Philadelphia is going to have a great team too. I think Tyrese Maxey, if he even keeps somewhat of that efficiency, he's going to have a fantastic year. Harden and Embiid, I still believe they're going to figure it out. And of course, I'm going to say the Dallas Mavericks. Of course, why would I not? I think they're going to be a fantastic team to watch as well. The pick and roll is going to be unstoppable. The Christian Wood and Luka Doncic duo is going to be great. I think it's going to be one of the best pick and roll duos in the league. I'm never going to count them. I'm never going to say they're not going to be exciting, no matter who's on the team. So, but they do have Luka, so it's good for me. And just overall, what just highlights, man, I think the Houston Rockets are going to be really similar to how the Charlotte Hornets were last year. I mean, just a lot of dunks, a lot of great plays, and you have some efficient players on the team too with Jabari Smith. I think it's going to be a great team to watch with Jalen Green leading that team.
So who are you least excited to watch?
Yeah, the least excited to watch, it doesn't change with any sort of aspect. It's going to be the Spurs. I'm
Wow.
sorry. I'm sorry, San Antonio. I don't know. I'm sorry. I can't do it. There's no one on the team that really gets me excited to watch them too much. I mean, I like Devin Vassell a little bit, and Keldon Johnson impressed me a little bit. USA, but I'm sorry. I don't know how many Spurs games I'm going to tune in this year, but it's not going to be many. So I can promise you that. I'm sorry, Spurs fans.
Wow. All right, Drew. I should have said we should exclude our favorite teams, but. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, okay, if we're doing favorite teams, the Golden State Warriors. Aside from them being my favorite team, I think this is going to be a very interesting. I mean, they're basically finally pushing the chips a little bit more to the center in terms of the youth movement. I mean, they got rid of a lot of pieces to ensure that Kuminga, Moody, and Wiseman would start to get the touches and minutes that their draft capital, warrants that they get. So I think that'll be interesting to see because for Warriors fans, if just one or two of those guys pop, the dynasty lives on. If all three of them pop, dear God, I pray I'm going to be insufferable for the next 10 years. In terms of, I'll take this another, because Matt hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of good teams, I think, that are going to get healthy this year, that are going to make some runs. But that I'm excited to watch from the standpoint of, if A, am I going to be right or wrong? And B, if I'm right, it's going to be one hell of a ride. Twitter's going to be a buzz. It's got to be the Nets and the Lakers. The Nets from the standpoint that there is still potential for good basketball to be played there. If you take away all the drama and you look at the roster, you're like, this is a team that, if it all goes perfectly well, could very easily win the East. But obviously, we're banking on that not happening. I can't wait. I am so excited to hear the quotes and the issues that come from this team. I'm so excited. I can't wait for Kyrie's going to announce his own religion soon. And I'm like, I can't wait. Kyrieism is going to take the world by storm. And then the Lakers, kind of the same thing. I mean, you've hitched your wagon to LeBron and AD, which on its base surface level, you think is a good idea until you realize the rest of that roster is not very good, that there's not a great fit, and that if anything happens to either of those players for not even a substantial amount of time, but for like a 10 to 15 game stretch, your season can evaporate like that. So those are the teams I'm probably most excited to watch because I'm hoping they crash and burn. Just to further validate myself and my opinions on the show. In terms of least exciting, yeah, I mean, it has to probably be the Spurs. I just think when you look at their roster, there's not like a good player that's going to put up monster numbers on that team that you can get behind. They're like, they don't have any like rookie that you're like, oh, maybe they'll get to really pop and shine. The rookies they drafted are a little bit more mundane. Like, I think they'll be good, but they're not big name brands. I mean, Jeremy Sohan's a defender. His hair is the most entertaining thing about his game that people like the casual viewer is going to watch. And like Malachi Branham, again, I think he's going to be really solid, but he's a first-year rookie on a not great team. How good can he be? So that's going to have to be my take for the least exciting team to watch.
All righty. Well, I'm excited to see my Sixers, of course. I think they're going to be very good this year. I'm also very excited to watch Atlanta. But I think I'm really excited to watch Houston. I said this right after the draft. I can't wait to see these guys play. So, and you guys covered that. The team that, anytime I see them coming up on the television, I'm like, oh, not again. It's the Lakers. It's the Lakers, You
don't want to watch Russell Westbrook shoot air balls?
It's not that. It's just, there's nobody on the team that I haven't seen play like 1,000 times before. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing new. There's nothing fresh. It's just the same old.
Not only 1,000 times have you seen them play, but you saw them play better before. Like it's like dragging out, like you're like rolling out the like corpse of your just like waving them around.
Mm.
Like, oh, okay, this is great. I'm watching the shell of Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, so that's my answer there. All right, so next question. Terry says, I see LeBron is pushing for an expansion team in Vegas. I'm not a fan of this idea. How about you guys? Terry, I am total agreement. My thoughts are, with Vegas, a lot of people there are transplants. They're temporary there. They go there, just, seasonal workers and stuff like that. I keep on going back to the Super Bowl, like it's like watching football in LA, where the opposing team has more fans than and who was it? Was it the quarterback of the Chargers said the other day that I think they said they have to do silent counts at home.
Yep.
Because there's so many opposing.
If you watch the Rams and Cowboys game, they were literally like cheering. It was like the stadium was like a buzz for the Cowboys,
right,
and the Rams.
Right. And so I just feel like Vegas is another one of those towns where you're just not going to really have a good fan base. And it's just going to be like whoever's in town that week is going to show up for the game, and I just don't think that's good for the sport.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the reality of it is it's probably going to happen because the dollar signs and LeBron seeing the dollar signs. So, say what you want about his capitalistic instincts. It's going to make sense from it's going to draw people because of the money standpoint. I mean, it's the sports gambling capital of the world. I mean, the expansion teams need to end up in Seattle. I think we're all in agreement at this point. Yes. Seattle deserves a team. I've heard rumors of like Pittsburgh. I could be down for a Pittsburgh basketball team. I mean, the way that they get behind their, the Steelers, for example, is awesome. The Pirates aren't great, but they have a fandom. So those, I do think that I get tired of hearing, because you always hear, with Seattle as a prime example, we're testing the market viability. The market is viable. Like, what are you talking about? Not just that, but with streaming. I could be a Supersonics fan in New York and tune in and watch a game if I really want to. So I'm tired of hearing the market, but they're not trying to put a team in freaking, Camas, Washington, which is a small little podunk town my grandparents live in. They're trying to put a team in Seattle, which is a major market. So, if you can have a team in Oklahoma City, you can have a team in Seattle.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah, Vegas it's going to happen, but I'm kind of like, whatever. They're going to be a team that the players are going to like playing there.
And I don't know about you, but it just seems so LeBron for him to be pushing for a team in Vegas. It's just like, you know what I'm saying? It's just, I don't know. It's just like, yeah, figures. So Mav, you have any thoughts on expansion in Vegas?
Well, there should be no talk of expansion until Seattle gets a team. Right. When you talk about the market, I could argue that Seattle is a basketball city, other than any sport. I mean, basketball is so popular over there. It's ridiculous. Until they get an expansion team, I don't think we should be talking about anything else. I do think that Vegas makes sense in the aspect of, Drew said it. It's the sports betting capital of the United States. I think it makes sense in that aspect. But, Rich, you made a great point. It's just kind of like people are just there seasonally. So it doesn't – as far as a loyal fan base, it would be tough to build one in that city. So, I'm kind of just 50-50
that's part of what makes, basketball so exciting, especially college basketball. Even if it's a so-so Iowa team, when somebody goes to Iowa, when Ohio State comes to Iowa, the fans are just going to be screaming and yelling, and it just adds just a whole layer of excitement. And yeah, so I don't know. I just think you might be missing out on that in Vegas. Next question is from Marcus, and it's a fantasy question. All right, get ready, guys. This is a long list. Marcus says, I have the 10th and 11th picks. He must be on the wraparound in my fantasy draft. Which two guys do you like out of Steph Curry, Trae Young, James Harden, LeBron James, Karl Anthony Towns, John Morant, Tyrese Halliburton, Anthony Edwards, and Devin Booker? So we're supposed to pick two guys. If we had, those were our selections.
I think the first big question, and we don't know this, is the type of scoring. Is this just a standard head-to-head? Is it a category-based scoring? Because like if it's category-based scoring, for example, I think Steph Curry is a must-take because not only is he going to give you the points, he'll give you some assists. He gets his hands in there for steals. He's actually a decent rebounding guard. But you're pretty much going to have a great jump start on the 3-point made and 3-point percentage categories. So I think I'd probably take Steph regardless at 10 and 11, no matter the scoring format, just because when he has those Steph Curry games, you're pretty much going to walk away with the win that week. The second player is tough. LeBron is probably the safest of the bunch. I think he's like the low floor, but you do have to worry about the ceiling if he misses time. He's going to set the stat sheet. He's still going to get his numbers, but I think you can maybe swing a little bit bigger. I think Trae Young could be a really interesting pick here because, I mean, he's a potential walking double-double in points and assists. And again, if you have Steph Curry and Trae Young and you're in a category-based scoring format, your shooting numbers are probably going to be really high. You're going to have a good shot to win those weeks. They're going to put up points. And then assist-wise, I think Trae Young is going to get close to, again, 8-10 assists a game. So I'd probably maybe lean – it's hard. I think Steph Curry's a must draft, and then I would look at probably Trae Young or LeBron at that next spot if I was there.
Yeah, it's tough because we don't know the type of league that it is, but I'm going to say this. If you are looking for a guy whose usage rate is through the roof, there's two guys that you listed who I think is going to be really up there, which is Ja Morant and Tyrese Halliburton.
Yeah.
I think those guys are going to have the ball a lot, especially Ja Morant with the Jaren Jackson injury. Tyrese Halliburton on that tanking Pacers team. Those guys' usage rates are going to be out of this world. So if that matters to you, I would highly suggest both of those guys.
Yeah. I'm a big Halliburton guy. I've said on the show. It's going to be honest, it boils down to like if this was a 12-team league or a 14-team league where it's a little bit deeper, I would definitely look at Halliburton. But I think passing up Steph Curry at 10 and 11 is just I don't think you can do that. I think he's kind of a must draft at that point.
All right, I'm going to go with youth here because a lot of these guys to me are on the downside. So I'm going to say Trae Young and Halliburton would be my picks. So.
Yeah, I think if you draft those guys and you're in a category-based format, you're probably going to win the assist every week, minimum.
Right. All right. So this is we're back on something we beat to death last week. So let's keep
Bring it on. Bring it on. I know that this is targeted at me. I already know.
Nick wants to know, why are you guys so in love with the age limit, the one and done rule? If a kid can play, let him make some bucks. And I threw in here an article that I did, when we were discussing this last week, I was talking about the different salary options you had if you were still in high school. And I mentioned Ignite, and I forgot that Ignite actually pays a lot more money. I mean, I mentioned that they paid a lot more money than the average G League player, but I forgot how much. So London Johnson, who I believe was like the third rated player in the class of 2024, but then reclassified, he just signed with Ignite for over $1 million, which is about the same that Scoot Henderson is making. So, Drew, go ahead. Let's be. I mean, I don't want to beat this to death because we already did last week. But I think the point we were trying to make is we don't. I'm always thinking about the kids' perspective, and I just don't want kids leaving school before they're ready, and then ending up, playing in Sioux Falls, for $30K a year.
Absolutely.
It's
first and foremost, I'll keep it simple. If you're a fan of the game of basketball, this is bad for the game of basketball. Basketball, unlike football, it's a rep based. It's a feel for the game. You develop a feel for it. It's very fast paced. You have to develop the passing instinct, the shooting instinct, how to rotate on defense. Coaching matters, but a lot of it is you know how to do it or not. It's an instinct based game, in my opinion. just rotating, boxing out, being able to run the break, make the right pass. You do that by playing the game. High school basketball is not high-level basketball in this country for the most part. There's a few big teams that play each other, but for the most part, I watched Aaron Gordon play in high school, people. Okay, he walked in the gym and dropped 45 on us because he's bigger and stronger. He didn't shoot. He wasn't the best shooter. He wasn't the best player, but he was bigger, stronger, faster. It's going to be bad for the game. These kids are going to miss out on high-level coaching. They're going to miss out on that developmental phase. I already think one and done is a mistake for a lot of guys. Anyone, put it this way, did any of you think listening that Peyton Watson's ready to be an NBA contributor? I'll leave it at that. And then secondly, like Rich says, from the money standpoint, teams are if this happens, yes, there's going to be the guys that pop and they're going to make their money, and guys like maybe a Paolo Banchero who they're probably pro ready out of high school to some degree from a physical standpoint. They've got a pretty polished game. But there's a lot of guys that teams are going to take these flyers on, and like Rich said, they're not going to get those. Teams are going to be more aggressive with this type of rule of probably turning down second-year options on rookies to some degree if they don't see any sort of pop, because they're not going to want to get stuck in the Anthony Simon situation where you don't really see it a lot. He kind of pops, but there's question marks of did you pop because you had just kind of by default, or did you pop because you're taking strides to become a better NBA player? And now he's got a 4-year, $100 million contract. Teams are going to be wary of that. I just think that you're hurting the game. You're putting kids in a situation where they have to make these very big grown-up decisions about money, about their future and their lives and their careers at 17, 18 years old. And in today's world, you bet there's going to be plenty of people, whether it's AAU coaches, agents, parents, and these kids here, go take the deal. Go to the NBA. Go to the NBA, they flame out, never hear from them again.
Right. I mean, look at the kid from Stanford, Terrell Terry. Remember him? He was
yes.
Yeah, everybody said he was going to be a lottery pick because he could hit from 35 feet now.
Yep.
And I kept on saying no, that's about the only thing he could do, and he shouldn't go into the draft. But that's part of the problem. Everybody around him, they see a couple dunks or they see a couple 40-foot 3-pointers, and they're like, oh, what a great player. Shut up, watch him for a while. He's not that good. And then the kid gets drafted. He gets drafted in the second round. He gets very little guaranteed money. Where is he today? He's nowhere. He's not on a team, and he's 21 years old, and he was going to school at Stanford for free.
Yep. As someone who works there, it's the best. It's one of the greatest institutions on the planet in terms of. Put it this way, you graduate from Stanford in any capacity, there is a job with a very high salary waiting for you at the end of that tunnel.
Right.
I have a good friend of mine went to Yale as a Division I crew athlete, like rowing,
right?
And walked out with a job, like basically guaranteed. He's making probably close to 6 figures, and he's 24 years old now, 25.
All the kids that play basketball at Notre Dame, they all end up with good jobs. Whether they play basketball or not. I just have a better relationship with that, institution than most. But, so I know that a lot of those guys are so successful in other aspects of life. So,
yeah. And again, the game of basketball, in my opinion, will suffer because years ago, if you were a high schooler making the jump, there were busts, but it was Dwight Howard, it was Kevin Garnett, it was Kobe Bryant, because it was like, okay, you're pretty sure that this guy's going to work. In today's world, where it's all social media based, you've got 5 different coaches in your ear telling you to do it, an agent now at 17. I think there's going to be a lot more kids pressured into going that aren't ready. That's my fear.
You remember Bleacher Report was saying Leonard Miller was a lottery pick?
Yeah.
Did you watch Leonard Miller on Tuesday?
14.
Did you watch Leonard Miller on Tuesday?
Yeah, horrible.
Yeah,
he's nowhere near pro ready. He's probably 3 to 4 years away from even being someone that I'd consider maybe he makes a jump, but I'm like, no way. So it's bad for the game of basketball. And the problem is as with most things, is there's going to be a kid in the next couple of years that's going to do it, and he's going to work out, he's going to pop, and everyone's going to hold him up. And there's going to be 25 kids that flame out of the league.
25, more like 2,500.
Yeah, exactly. That flame out, and everyone's going to no, but look, he did it. It's like, yeah, okay, but he's a freak athlete, and he's just a good ball player. Like, it happens. I think Paolo Banchero would have been fine out of high school.
Right.
But
right.
He was also the number 1 pick in the draft.
Right.
Come on, people.
Exactly. Maverick, you have any thoughts on this topic that Drew and I have beat to death for 2 weeks in a row?
Yeah, I don't really have a hard opinion on this, but I am going to say this, Nick. It's not about the fact that we don't want him to, just using, your question, make some bucks. We just want to make sure that they're mature enough and they're developed enough to continue making the bucks. It's not just a one-time thing and then they're out of the league because they come in way too early. We want to just make sure that they're developed, mature, and are ready to take on a role in the NBA rather than just coming in playing AAU where it's kind of just they do whatever they want to do.
Right. And I think, if you want to get better as a player, and we talk about this all the time on the show, whether it can go one direction or the other. It could be the Patrick Baldwin decision, like, why are you at University of Milwaukee when you should be at Duke, or why Amoni Bates, why are you at Central Michigan when you should have stayed at Memphis or at least transferred to Alabama or something? You want to play to the level that challenges you. It's not too easy, but you don't want to go somewhere where it's so hard that you get cut or you end up, in the G League, and that's not the best thing for your development. If you look at the G League statistics, everybody's got great G League statistics. Like I said, the MVP of the G League yesterday was cut by the Sixers. Play to your level, get your education, and the money will come. All right. So, alrighty, we beat that one to death. So, hopefully, we will definitely have a guest next week, folks. We will, Lowell Murray, at a minimum, will be joining us. He covers the Clippers for the Athletics, and he'll be helping us with our fearless forecast as we will narrow down our playoff picks, our NBA championship. We'll make our picks for the MVP, and so forth and so on. We're basically doing a survey now of all the people on the HP staff and some other writers and so forth. So that's what we'll be doing next week. And by the way, great questions this week, folks. I think that was a record number of questions we had. And if you want to send those questions, or if you're interested in our fantasy league, write us at admin@hoopsprospects.com. Once again, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Maverick. We'll see you soon, folks.